Are the meeting platform hosts ready to begin?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, are you ready to begin the hearing?
I am.
Please provide a 5-second countdown.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I call this joint session of the Senate House and Veterans Affairs Committee to order. Commander Mcneil, I want to thank you for being here today. Appreciate your advocacy on behalf of our nation's veterans and their families. This is a crucial moment as the veterans emerge from a year-long pandemic. Congress and VA must not forget the lessons that we've learned. Now we know that with the right resources, coordination, and authorities, we can accomplish almost anything. That's why going back to normal can't be our goal. We have to do better than normal. That means doing a better job of connecting aging veterans to long-term care options that suit them the best, including the Caregivers program. That means ensuring the claims backlog is addressed in a way that doesn't sacrifice quality for speed. And it means doing absolutely everything in our power to ensure veterans are connected to the care and the benefits they deserve in a more timely manner. Since I introduced the Cost of War Act last year, we've seen a lot of progress. VA has created a new presumptive process that has added dozens of new presumptions, including the 9 announced yesterday by the President. To put that in perspective, over the previous 8 years, only 4 conditions were added. And 3 of those, bladder cancer, hypothyroidism, and Parkinsonism, were only added because of a tester amendment, interestingly enough, to the 2021 Defense Authorization Act, which forced the administration to do so. So in my view, we can't just rely on the executive branch of Congress because we have a constitutional duty to do our job as the legislative branch on behalf of our veterans. But for us to get comprehensive toxic exposure legislation done, which we all want, the political games, the political posturing, and the questioning of motives really does need to stop. If we're going to fulfill our obligation to veterans, we need to roll up our sleeves and we need to do our jobs. And we need to work together in a bipartisan and bicameral way to deliver the results that you have earned and that you deserve. So I look forward to our conversation today, and thank you again for being there. We await your marching orders. I'll kick it over to Congressman Levin for the chairman's response.
Well, thank you, Senator Tester. It's an honor to join all the members of the House and Senate Committees on Veterans Affairs in person and virtually to hear directly from the organizations that represent our nation's veterans about the issues that matter most to them. I would like to personally welcome Mr. Fritz Michalczyk, Commander-in-Chief of the VFW, and the leaders of all 9 organizations on our second panel. I'm grateful for your tireless work on behalf of our nation's veterans, their families, and survivors. The opportunity to hear from our VSO partners is incredibly important to me. I was encouraged to see the overwhelming support that VFW and other VSOs provided last Thursday in a letter to House leadership supporting the Honoring Our Pact Act. Chairman Takano asked me to express his deep regret that he can't be with us today, as he's currently on the House floor fighting to pass the Pact Act. But he asked that I thank you all for the tremendous support you've provided during this process. Chairman Tester, I'd like to submit the letter from our VSO partners into the record if there's no objection.
Without objection.
The Bipartisan Pact Act will finally provide access to VA health care to over 3.5 million veterans exposed to toxic substances. It requires that VA presume certain veterans were exposed to toxic substances rather than placing the burden on veterans to prove this link themselves. Vietnam veterans waited more than 40 years for benefits related to Agent Orange exposure because of Congress's piecemeal solutions. We cannot allow this to happen again. Toxic exposed veterans have held up their part of the pact, and now it's our turn. Today we're keeping our promise, and we look forward to working with the Senate to make this law. VSO partners like the VFW and all those who are joining us today represent veterans and their families at all stages of life and service. Hearing from these partners allows the committees the opportunity to hear directly about what's most important to your members and how we can be of service to our nation's veterans. In the last Congress, together, we secured several important wins for veterans, including passing the Blue Water Navy Vietnam Veterans Act, the Deborah Sampson Act, the Veterans Compact Act, the Commander John Scott Hannon Act, and the Isaacson Rowe Act. We're very proud of these accomplishments, but they're only the beginning. We need to build on these achievements and continue our fight for better health care and benefits in this Congress and beyond. I've read your testimony, and it's clear that I share your priorities. The House Veterans Affairs Committee's top priorities for this Congress include creating a more inclusive and welcoming VA, building equity for an increasingly diverse veteran community, reducing veteran suicide, addressing toxic exposure, ensuring student veterans receive quality education, advocating for women veterans, modernizing VA, supporting VA's long-term care facilities, improving VA's management and oversight, and ensuring our legislative accomplishments are implemented effectively. Our diverse veteran community includes higher numbers of women, LGBTQ+, Black, Asian, Hispanic, and Native veterans than ever before. Today, we have the honor of welcoming two new organizations, Service Women's Action Network and the Black Veterans Empowerment Council, to the conversation. This marks the first time that these two organizations have participated in our spring VSO hearings and continues this committee's new tradition of welcoming these voices to the witness table. It is our country's diversity that strengthens our armed forces and veteran communities, and minority veterans deserve to feel safe and welcome when they enter VA's doors, with outreach, programming, and solutions that address their unique needs. Additionally, VA must acknowledge the diversity of its workforce to address systemic discrimination in the workplace. We must ensure that health care and benefits are fairly and equitably distributed to all eligible veterans, and to do that, we must ensure a safe and equitable workplace for VA employees. Our work to prevent veteran suicide also continues. We must relentlessly pursue well-researched and scientifically sound policies that are proven to prevent suicide. We have big goals, but I know that with your support and insight here today, along with the support of the Biden-Harris administration, we'll be able to deliver on them and fulfill the promises we've made to our nation's veterans. I look forward to hearing your testimony today, and thank you for your continued advocacy and support for the veteran community. I'll yield back.
The outstanding senator from Kansas, Senator Moran.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I welcome you and us joining our House colleagues for the hearing today. I welcome the Commander-in-Chief of the Veterans of Foreign Wars and our panelists that follow this first panel. And I am all ears and interested in hearing what is said and how we can react and respond to make sure that those requests are honored. I welcome all of our witnesses, and I welcome all the veterans and particularly members of veteran service organizations at home who are watching today's hearing, and I highlight the number of Kansans who are doing that, and I thank them for their input to me on an ongoing basis. We've accomplished a lot together in recent years. Legislation to reduce veteran suicide, improve access and choice in health care, resources to improve disability claims in the appeals process, educational benefit protection expansion, flexibility to assist veterans through the COVID-19 pandemic. I expect these bipartisan efforts to continue. It gives me pleasure, Chairman Tester, to tell Kansans when I'm home and visiting about the partisanship or the divide in the country and in this Congress that while I prefer to be the chairman of the committee, you can't tell a lot of difference in the outcome and the ability for us to work together, whether it's Chairman Tester or Chairman Moran. And I am grateful for that, and Kansans are reassured that there's a circumstance in which maybe the partisanship of this place is set aside, and they want that many more places than it exists, but they're pleased to know that it's true when it comes to caring for our men and women who have served our country. And I appreciate that very much, and I continue to commit to working with you, Chairman Tester, to see that we get outcomes. Always appreciate being complimented for my efforts, but I'd love to be complimented for my results. We have a lot yet to discuss on how to appropriately address toxic exposure, both on the health care and disability compensation side. And I thank the chairman again and Representative Ranking Member Bost for our work on the Health Care for Burn Pits Veterans Act. And I look forward to working with all House members and senators and whatever party to find a solution that's in the best interest of all veterans. We need the VSOs' advocacy, their partnership. I appreciate the relationships I have with each of you and your organizations and your members, and we have a lot that we can do with your information and knowledge. I always indicate that mostly what I know about what should be my job on this committee is what veterans at home tell me should be my job on this committee, and it often, unfortunately, comes through what we call casework. Somebody bringing us a problem that they have. We work hard to solve the problem for that veteran, but it also is a reminder that other veterans are in similar circumstances and we need to fix the system as well. Before I yield back, I want to again, as I did yesterday, thank all of our U.S. service members currently serving in NATO countries, including those from home in the 1st Infantry Division who are in Poland and Romania. And we've had a lot of folks recently deployed as well from other places across the country. I hope the Ukrainian people, and I hope that the servicemen and women of the United States of America know that they are in our thoughts and prayers. And just as they are serving us today, our commitment to them will be the same to those who've served us in the past. We'll do everything to honor your service and make sure that the promises that were made to you are kept. Again, I thank you for being here. I look forward to your testimony, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Ranking Member Bost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank you and Ranking Member Moran. And I know that Chairman Takano is on the floor. I would be on the floor, but the pretest that we had to have before we were to go to the State of the Union last night, Monday, when I did that, they discovered COVID, and I feel great, but I'm coming to you from a quarantined in the hotel room. So, but it's good to be with you. And for those of you that don't and have not met me yet, my name's Mike Bost. I know what it's like to put on the uniform and serve this nation. I also know what it's like to take it off and that uniform and transition back to civilian life. Like many of you, the principles I learned in the Marine Corps still have application today. I also know what it's like to file a claim for benefits and to be denied and denied and denied. And that's why it is that I am so passionate. And the other reason I'm so passionate is not only am I a veteran, I have a father who served in Korea, a grandfather who served in Korea, an uncle who served in Vietnam that was victim of the ultimate oxymoron, friendly fire. He is doing well today, but he is 100% disabled. And I also, my son is a lieutenant colonel in the Corps, and my grandson is a lance corporal in the Corps. So it is very personal to me, the issues that we face. But, and these joint hearings that we're doing annually are vitally important to get your input so that we can have it to carry your ideas and your concerns to try to correct those problems. And it's vitally that we meet with the VSO leaders and the members from across the country, like those that we're meeting with today. You understand the complex problems veterans and their families face and what VA can do better to help them. Your advocacy here in DC and your service throughout the country makes a difference. The COVID-19 pandemic created hardship for veterans in all walks of life. Volunteer activities suffered during the past 2 years. VFW and the members of the VSOs represent here today are needing more than ever to be advocates for the veterans, understanding their needs and helping them navigate the VA bureaucracy. I want to thank each and every one of you for your service in uniform and your continued service. I am proud of what we've accomplished together in the first session of this Congress. We expanded VA's ability to offer vaccines to veterans and their families. We improved veterans' job training and education. We increased transparency of VA's COVID emergency funds. We provided new mental health resources, especially for rural veterans. We strengthened security in VA medical centers. We passed the largest veterans' cost of living increase to cushion the impact of rising inflation. I'm also proud that the VA cut through red tape to fill thousands of medical positions, and the veteran suicide rate went down for the first time in years, but we have a lot more to do. But as you know, our work is never over. The most important issues we're working on right now is supporting toxic exposed veterans. Each of us have made improving care and benefits for toxic exposed veterans our top priority this Congress. I know it's only March, but time is getting painfully short. It is time for us to put our heads together and work across the aisle and across the Capitol to get this done for veterans. I understand that passage of a single comprehensive package is preferred by many. I believe we must take action where we can and give toxic exposure veterans health care now. With the Senate's unanimous passage of the Health Care for Burn Pits Veterans Act in February, we have that opportunity. The House should pass the Health Care for Burnt Pit Veterans Act today. It's the right first step. And then we should work together to deliver the other benefits and services toxic exposed veterans need and deserve as soon as possible. I again want to thank Senator Tressa and Tester and Moran for their leadership and for finding a viable path forward to address the healthcare needs of toxic exposed veterans. Your organizations have also been a critical advocate on toxic exposures. I thank you and for the work that you've done. And I thank you for the work I know you'll keep doing until we get to the finish line. I know that all of you will continue to fight for the best interest of this nation and our veterans, and I promise you that I will do it as well. And with that, I will yield back.
Next, I want to introduce Ryan Gallucci, who will introduce the VFW team, and then kick it back to Ranking Member Bost, who will introduce Commander Michalczyk for the opening statement. You have the floor, Mr. Gallucci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the Senate and House Veterans Affairs Committees, we look forward to the day when once again the VFW and our auxiliary can pack this room to hear from our national commander. But thankfully, many are still able to join us via video link at the Hyatt Crystal City, and it is my honor to introduce them. First, from the VFW Auxiliary, National President Gene Hamill from Florida. Next, our national officers of the VFW. Senior Vice Commander-in-Chief Tim Borland from Arizona. Junior Vice Commander-in-Chief Dwayne Sarmiento from New Jersey. Our past Commanders-in-Chief, our national officers, our National Council of Administration, all our VFW and auxiliary leaders and staff, as well as the VFW and auxiliary members watching around the world, especially our comrades, like VFW National Staff Member Tara Artiega, our claims representative from San Juan, Puerto Rico, who is currently deployed supporting NATO on the doorstep of the war in Ukraine. Finally, joining here at the table, to my left, Director of the VFW National Veterans Service, Patrick Murray from Rhode Island, and to my right, Chairman of the VFW National Legislative Committee, Jason Hoffman from Illinois. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And now to introduce our Commander-in-Chief of the Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States, Ranking Member of the House Veterans Affairs Committee, Mike Bost, representing Illinois' 12th District.
Well, thank you. And once again, it's good to have everybody here. And I'm pleased to introduce my constituent, VFW's new Commander-in-Chief, Matthew M. Fritz Michalczyk, who is with us today from Sparta, Illinois. As a lifetime member of Post 2698 in Sparta, Fritz has been a member of the VFW for more than 30 years. He has long been a leader in our Southern Illinois community, and I am grateful that he is now leading our veterans on the national stage. Fritz served in the United States Air National Guard from 1989 to 1999 with the 131st Tactical Fighter Wing. He deployed overseas from 1990 to 1991 during Desert Shield and Desert Storm as a security policeman. We like to refer to those as MPs. And he then went on to hold a number of vital leadership positions at the local, state, and national level. Fritz, thank you for your service then and now. There's a special place for Americans who are willing to dedicate their lives to serving a cause greater than one person or place. Veterans across the country are lucky to have you and at their side, both as an advocate and as a friend, and I'm proud to count myself among them. With that, I'll now turn it over to you, Fritz.
Thank you very much. Before I begin my remarks, I would like to point out my legislative chairman, Jay Hoffman, who is sitting next to me. Today, Jay is wearing his Korean War veteran grandfather's VFW cap. And that's very special to Jay, and it shows what the VFW is all about: family, tradition, and generations of service. So thank you, Jay. Chairman Tester and Takano, Ranking Members Moran and Bost, members of the Senate and House Committees on Veterans Affairs, it is my honor to be with you today on behalf of the 1.5 million members of the Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States and its auxiliary, America's largest wartime veterans organization. I would like to thank the members of the committee on your hard work for veterans in the 117th Congress. During a time of divisive partisanship and a global pandemic, you have worked across the aisle and across chambers to pass legislation to improve the care and benefits for America's veterans, families, and caregivers. The House and Senate Committees on Veterans Affairs continue to remain as shining examples of how work should be conducted in Washington, D.C. For generations, veterans have returned home from war with an array of unexplained health conditions and illnesses associated with the toxic exposures and environmental hazards they encountered in service. Today is no different, and toxic exposure has become synonymous with military service. For this reason, the time is now for Congress to change the way veterans receive health care and benefits to help save our lives. At this joint hearing last year, and in hearings in April and May of 2021, the VFW called upon Congress to work in a bipartisan manner and with veteran service organizations to develop a comprehensive solution for toxic exposure. You heard our message, and you took several pieces of VFW-supported legislation and put them together. The VFW supports Senate Bill S. 3003, Cost of War Act of 2021, and House Bill H.R. 3967, honoring our Pact Act of 2021. We are also encouraged by the bipartisan and bicameral efforts to move each component of these larger bills across the finish line, such as H.R. 6659 and S. 3541. But these are just first steps in a long overdue process. These historic pieces of legislation would help millions of veterans exposed to toxins. They would address the still lingering conditions and locations for Vietnam War veterans exposed to Agent Orange. It would take care of atomic veterans and veterans from the K-2 base in Uzbekistan. Each has a significant focus on burn pits and improving the Department of Veterans Affairs disability claims process. The time is now to pass these bills and finally address the needs of sick and disabled veterans. We must work together to reconcile these two comprehensive legislative packages and pass a final bill swiftly. We must learn from the past and not delay any longer. We must end the piecemeal approach of addressing the problem one disease and one location at a time. We must fix the process now for all veterans of the past, present, and future. This is all the more timely as even now our troops who guard the gates of freedom face uncertainty in Europe and all around the world. In order to utilize the care and benefits veterans have earned, they must have faith and confidence in a dependable and veteran-focused claims process. Due to the chaos of the COVID-19 pandemic, veterans faced unprecedented challenges in accessing and understanding their rights to competent representation for benefits claims. As a result, bad actors seized the opportunity to aggressively target veterans online, seeking to charge predatory fees to assist with benefit claims. While we never stopped working for veterans, the VFW has learned a great deal about how to better communicate the right to no-cost, quality representation. And we look forward to working with VA to clamp down on those bad actors. Adjudicating certain claims such as toxic exposure, PTSD, and military sexual trauma, also known as MST, require specialty training and regular oversight. According to a 2018 VA OIG report, VA incorrectly adjudicated half of the reviewed PTSD claims for MST. The OIG indicated 6 specific recommendations for VA to review and correct denied claims and to implement a series of changes needed to improve claims processing for MST. Regrettably, the most recent OIG report just 6 months ago found that VA had not effectively implemented those recommendations. The time is now to fix this. VA's National Screening Program screens all patients enrolled in VA for MST. National data from this program reveal that about 1 in 3 women and 1 in 50 men respond affirmatively to having experienced sexual trauma while serving their country. All veterans who screen positive are offered a referral for free MST-related treatment. The VFW believes this should start a similar process that refers veterans who have experienced MST to also begin the claims process immediately. Forcing these veterans to fight again and again for treatment and benefits they have earned is not only cruel and unnecessary, it creates a duplicative appeals claims process. The best way to ensure veterans receive the care and benefits they have earned is to get it right the first time. To address the current workload of VA disability claims, the VFW believes that there is only so much more hiring personnel will accomplish, and it will take time to train this new influx of hires. The VBA also needs significant investment in its IT claims processing infrastructure to move to a single unified system, and that includes the latest in automation and artificial intelligence technologies. A digital benefits upgrade, similar in scope to the GI Bill, would require a significant investment in VA's IT budget and a strong collaboration with VSOs that provide claims representation. We commend VA for embracing technology upgrades such as the digital GI Bill, and we look forward to all the positive outcomes this new platform will bring. Benefits like the GI Bill, VR&E, VA home loans, and vet tech all set up veterans for success. The transformative benefits under VBA need to be enhanced, protected, and championed at all times. And that is why the VFW calls for the creation of a fourth estate, a fourth administration, so the C&P benefits and the readjustment benefits currently within VBA can have their own undersecretaries who can truly focus and grow each respective set of benefits. The VFW believes a proper and well-rounded transition from the military is one of the most important things our service members need in order to ease back into our society with minimal hardship. To that extent, the VFW places great emphasis on ensuring veterans receive the best counseling and mentorship before they leave military service. The VFW is happy to see some changes that have been made in the TAP program in the past years in order to bring a more tailored, personalized experience to transitioning service members and increasing access to family members. We are pleased to see DoD and VA have finally begun implementing a single unified electronic health record. However, the VFW sees additional areas for improvement, such as including accredited service officers in the formal TAP curriculum. Additionally, we want to see, as the law requires, a proper connection between service members and organizations in the community that already receive federal grant funding for this critical mission. Separating service members need to be informed about all of the available care and benefits they have earned through their service, and that is difficult to achieve in only 5 days. Transition information needs to be pushed to service members throughout their time in uniform, and TAP classes need to be restructured so service members are not, as we have so often heard, drinking from a fire hose. Specific care and benefits are important for all veterans, and it's important we highlight the needs of some who in the past have been overlooked. Minority veterans' health outcomes are affected by real and perceived bias. As the population of minority veterans continues to grow, VA needs to adapt to meet the need for access to both health care and benefits services. Women, LGBTQ+, racial and ethnic minorities face barriers and challenges across different life domains. We need to know the specific demographics and needs of that veteran population. The VFW urges VA to ensure that all VA forms and research capture this valuable basic demographic information to correctly track needs, benefits, and services. Until this is corrected, inconsistent data hinders proper and inclusive research. For years, VFW has come to Congress concerned about veteran suicide. We have all worked together on a number of innovations to try to address this national tragedy. Sadly, without proper demographic data and reporting on all aspects of VA usage to include benefit usage, it is impossible to know which programs are actually helping. Our veterans should receive first-rate care in our facilities. When COVID-19 hit, the VA healthcare system was the only healthcare network in the country to not only withstand the unprecedented challenge, but to also provide help through the fourth mission in towns and U.S. cities across the U.S. Unfortunately, VA's aging infrastructure needs increased attention. VA's aging infrastructure not only causes many veterans to wait too long and to travel too far for care, but also potentially endangers the health and lives of veteran patients and VA personnel. To overcome VA's infrastructure challenges, Congress must not only provide significantly increased funding to fully address these longstanding issues, but also enact comprehensive planning, budgeting, management, and oversight reforms to ensure more effective use of those funds. The VFW recommends VA's construction budget be approximately 3% of its overall operating budget annually. Lastly, the VFW honors our solemn oath to never leave our brothers and sisters, our comrades in arms, behind. We must never leave any missing or unaccounted for Americans behind on battlefields of the past, the present, or yes, the future. We urge Congress to continue fully funding and supporting the critical mission of the Defense Personnel Accounting Agency to make sure we bring every American service member home. Chairman Tester and Takano, ranking members Moran and Bost, other distinguished members of these committees, speaking for all of the members of the Veterans of Foreign Wars and its auxiliary, and on behalf of millions of service members, veterans, and their families around the world, I would like to thank you for your time and attention. I will leave you with my call to action and remind everybody that the time is now to address these critical issues. Thank you, and this concludes my remarks, and I am prepared to answer any questions you may have.
Commander Michalczyk, thank you very much for those comments. Before I get to my questions, and by the way, for the members of the House and Senate, the questions will be 3 minutes, not 5 as usual. I do want to recognize the VFW members that are viewing this hearing via video. I believe in a hotel in Crystal City, if I'm not mistaken. And so welcome to all of the folks that are watching the action here in the hearing room. It's good to have you here. Commander Michalczyk, thank you very much for your testimony. You wrote that any VA presumptive process should be codified so that future administrations will continue to be held to the same standard. I hear what you're saying, and I agree with what you're saying, but could you flesh that out a little more and talk about what would happen what could happen if we don't?
Thank you, sir. When it comes to administrative law, we know things can change easily with a changing administration or a changing viewpoint from the top. When you have that going on, veterans are left in a vacuum. They don't know from day to day what's going to happen. By codifying these ideas, by codifying this, we put it into law. We place it in your capable hands to pass a law, and it will stay there. It will not be open to the vagaries of politics, but it'll be open to what the people want, veterans care.
Thank you very much. I would like to get the VFW's general views on VA care. Would it be fair to say that most of your members prefer getting their health care from the VA?
Through anecdotal evidence, we have found that yes, indeed, we do enjoy VA care. When you go to a VA facility for health care, they know you. They know you're a veteran. They want to take care of you. They understand what you've been through. You don't get that in the private sector.
Do you and your members believe that community providers should be held to the same standard as we hold VA providers?
Of course. We have medical standards all over. I would say that if we have a standard, anyone who provides care to a veteran must uphold that standard.
And then finally, on the VA care front, is the VA helping veterans make informed decisions about where to get care by comparing quality at the department and the community?
We do need more outreach. I fear that our veterans don't really know what's available to them, or maybe they don't understand, and that's something VFW needs to do a better job about. We can reach out to millions of veterans and let them know what they can do and what they can't do. But it has to be a partnership between the VA, the VFW, and other VSOs.
So your testimony, you said that through advocates like the VFW, veterans can get free and competent help to file a claim. However, you also warned about bad actors targeting veterans with predatory fees for claim assistance. What should Congress be doing to protect veterans from being exploited?
Well, much like any time when you have bad actors exploiting the population in general, such as usury laws, you can come out and say, we will not stand for this. If there is bad advertising, if there is any way that someone comes forward and says, you're a veteran, I can assure you, you will get 100%. And if we don't worry, we'll take it to appeal. All of this adds up. Many of our veterans are not as savvy when it comes to law. And that's why we come forward and we tell people this is what you can do.
Thank you. Chairman Takano is now in the House, so I'll recognize him for his questions.
Thank you, Chairman Tester. Commander Metelchek, good to see you again. Good to see you this morning. I just came off the floor of the House. We concluded debate on the Pact Act. We're going to consider a couple amendments tomorrow, 3 amendments tomorrow, but we're pretty much done with the debate on the underlying bill. But one of the principal objections that was raised to the bill was its cost. And as an example, as a corollary to that example, a big sign was posted that veterans are taxpayers too. I understand that we're all taxpayers, but do you believe, Sir Commander, that do you believe that your members, your veteran members, would be willing to use taxpayer dollars to provide benefits that we make available in the Pact Act to compensate veterans who are ill from exposure to things like burn pits?
Veterans stand united in this. The cost of war includes the cost of peace. Dollars have to be spent to take care of our sick and disabled veterans, and I can assure you that veterans will stand behind you 100% to get this Pact Act across the finish line.
I thank you for that. what strikes me is that we have both political parties falling over themselves to offer more assistance to Ukraine, which I hardly approve of. I side with and I stand with freedom-loving people who are being besieged by bullies. But I'm wondering, where's the one-upmanship when it comes to the unfinished business of keeping our promise to our veterans? Can we not expect a political environment or create one in which both political parties fall over themselves to make sure that we take care of our veterans who have been exposed to toxic exposures?
It is unfortunate that when the peace comes, people forget about veterans. So we have to provide more diligence and get out to our veteran community. But Congress can also do that. You have the larger voice. We saw that last night when the president spent a lot of time talking about veterans and veterans issues. That will get the public's attention. So we are fully engaged and fully committed to make everyone aware that veterans issues are important, they're not going away, and with things going on in Ukraine today, we have our troops stationed nearby. Will they be the next people downwind from a toxic exposure? This will never go away.
Well, thank you, Commander. I was very proud to see our president mention veterans, the word veteran, many times over. I guess 3 times more than the last 3 stated unions. So very pleased that so much time was devoted to veterans. I yield back.
Thank you, Chairman Takano. Now recognizes Senator Moran for questions.
Thank you, Congressman. Commander, hello again. I failed in my comments earlier to thank you for your presence in Kansas City. It's a little bit across the state line, but we're proud to have the headquarters of the VFW so close in our neighborhood. And also the VFW Auxiliary. I should have mentioned their importance and value in serving veterans, and I thank them and their members and their leadership. The VA provided views on the Cost of War Act in July of last year, and Secretary McDonough noted that he has, quote, authority to establish regulatory presumptions of service connections where no statute expressly provides such presumptions, end quote. I understand the conversation, the testimony in response to Senator Tester's question about the value of having Congress address these, but I want to again point out that the Secretary admits, and it's our view, he has, a Secretary has the authority to do so. In the last year, and as recently as yesterday, the VA has taken action on 12 new presumptions, as we heard last night. There are still 20-something diseases across various bills being proposed as additional presumptions. The Biden administration indicated their support, as the chairman just indicated, for the Pact Act. Do you expect the VA to begin rulemaking process to add these presumptions if they are supportive of the Pact Act and the Secretary admits he has the authority to do so? While we take care of our legislative business, it'd be appropriate for the Department of Veterans Affairs to proceed in their rulemaking to bring these presumptions online as quickly as possible. Is that, would that make sense?
Not only do I expect it, I demand it.
Thank you. Do you know any reason that the administration would be reluctant to do that?
I don't see a reason. We can certainly have 2 things going at the same time. We can have VA continuing forward, working on new presumptions, which is within their right. It's a regulatory matter. But wouldn't it be better if society as a whole saw not only the VA, one small part of government doing that, but also these esteemed bodies in front of me coming out and saying, we're on board, we're doing it too.
Commander, I appreciate you using the word esteemed in front of these bodies, not something that is said every day these days. But I also would confirm or affirm to you that I too believe that the legislature, the Congress, has a significant role. We're the lawmakers. In fact, I often complain that administrations do things that are in the realm of Congress's responsibility under our Constitution. But in this case, we have granted the Secretary that authority to proceed. Let me ask a slightly different topic, on a different topic. I sent a letter to the President this week regarding the need to fill longstanding vacancies in critical positions at the Department of Veterans Affairs. Could you speak how the absence of an Undersecretary for Health and an Undersecretary for Benefits has impacted veterans, their dependents, for health care and benefits?
These positions are leadership positions within the VA. If we don't have leaders, how can we address the needs of our veterans? We are fully on board. If people are coming up, if people need to be confirmed, we should get on that right away, get them in the leadership positions, let them do the job that they have been hired to do, and that's help veterans.
I thank you for both of your answers. I would highlight that in addition to being confirmed, they also need to be nominated. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Now recognize Ranking Member Bost.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so I'm going to go down a little different path, if I could, Fritz. I need to know, because one of the things you brought up, that it was very much a concern that we've been working on, and that is the amount of veterans that are committing suicide. We know that it held for 20 years, or it's held for many, many years at 20 of those. Now, it did fall in 2019 slightly, but it's still way too many. And of those 20 that commit suicide today, only 6 of them have ever sought help from the VA. And I'm concerned about something. I'm going to guess you do too. And if you've heard it, many of the veterans that I talk with don't seek help quite often because of a rule that has been put in place by the previous administrations and never been corrected. And that is the fact that if you seek help from the VA and you receive a fiduciary, that fiduciary being assigned to you automatically triggers that the veteran would be turned into the NICS program and they would lose their Second Amendment right. Are you aware of that?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay. Well, I have a bill because I believe many of our veterans choose not to go to the VA because of that. How is it that veterans who served and protect all of our rights in the Constitution can have their rights unconstitutionally removed, and without any person that's not a veteran would automatically get the opportunity to go before a judge, and that judge would then rule if they were in danger to themselves or others, and that's the only way they can lose it. I'm carrying a bill at this time, and I know you're trying to support that, and I'd like to have you comment on it if you can, that basically takes that power away from the VA and allows it to go to the courts just like anybody else, and you don't automatically get triggered for a fiduciary taking care of the veteran.
I appreciate that, sir. And of course, coming from Southern Illinois, you know, we do enjoy the different rights that are afforded to us, and of course, the Second Amendment being one of those rights. We, the VFW, firmly believe that if we do not ask questions, we will not get people coming forward to tell us if they're contemplating or considering suicide. Okay. We certainly believe that it's appropriate to ask that question in a non-mandatory, non-binding way, but to simply say, how are you feeling today? Have you had issues? Are there stressors? Is COVID-19 causing you to have thoughts of harming yourself? The mere fact that we are asking that question, it's going to save lives. If we save one life, we can do that. I am not for automatically taking a person's firearms away because they're being truthful and they're seeking help. Right. We fully support you in your goal and your effort, but we have to ensure that we still ask the question. A person can certainly decline to answer, and that is within their right. But I believe, as you're saying, we need to have something going forward that VA personnel can talk to people. If we talk to them, we can help them.
My time's expired, but I do want to say thank you to all of you for what you do, because you are that front line that can meet with those. And I do thank you, and I'll continue to listen to the debate today. And thank you all for being here.
Thank the ranking member. I'll recognize myself. Commander Michalczyk, thank you again for joining us today, and want to give a special shout out to VFW posts 10577 in Oceanside and 9934 in Dana Point, California, which both do a wonderful job of serving veterans in my district. As chair of the Economic Opportunities Subcommittee, I share several of the economic priorities you outlined in your testimony, such as ensuring funding for job training programs, extending COVID-related protections for student veterans, and creating parity between active and reserve component education benefits. On that last item, I was thrilled that the House passed H.R. 1836, my Guard and Reserve GI Bill Parity Act, in January on an overwhelming bipartisan basis. And I want to thank VFW in particular. Your support was instrumental to achieving the outcome, and I hope that my Senate colleagues will advance the legislation soon. It's shameful that we've asked Guard and Reserve members to step up in response to natural disasters, the pandemic, and an attack on our democracy without crediting them for each day in uniform. And it's long past time that we provide some basic fairness in the way we allow Guard and Reserve members to accrue GI Bill benefits. Commander Michalczyk, can you speak to the impact this bill would have on veterans of the reserve components?
Speaking as a former Air Guardsman, this would be a wonderful benefit. When we sign up, we go through the same training. We're deployed at the same rates. We are put in the same situations as our active duty counterparts. To then say you're a second-class soldier doesn't sit well. And I think since the Gulf War, we have seen in this country that members of the Guard and Reserve are not second-class soldiers. So we applaud your efforts in this. Every day in uniform should count toward a veteran benefit, and we thank you for that.
Thank you. What would you say to those who might argue that parity is unnecessary because service members know their GI Bill eligibility when joining the Guard or Reserve?
I can speak personally to that. When I enlisted in the Air Guard, I was already a judge in the real world. Nobody told me about GI Bills or benefits. When I returned from the war and was put back into regular Guard status, even as an attorney, I didn't know my benefits. Back then, we didn't have briefings for Guard. We didn't have TAP for Guard. We were left to our own devices. I say any information we can impart to our service members, whether they're active, Guard, or Reserve, that will make them better capable of understanding their rights and their earned benefits, we have to do.
And what would you say to those who are concerned about the cost of expanding eligibility?
Once again, if someone is willing to put on a uniform and go into harm's way on behalf of their country, what difference does it make whether they're Guard, Reserve, or active? They all go out, they all fight, they all bleed red. Why should we not take care of them just as they are? They are all soldiers, whether they're full-time or citizen soldiers. We have to take care of them.
Well, I'm out of time, but Commander, I look forward to working with you and VFW to get this across the finish line. And Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
Senator Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, let me give a shout out to all my Louisiana people. You survived Mardi Gras. You're up here the day after, so good to see you, and good to see you kind of surviving celebration. Commander, thank you all for all you've done and continue to do. I asked a question yesterday. I'll ask it again today. I've learned that the majority of suicides among those who's veterans are within the first 6 months after separating. Now, we've been pushing DOD and the VA to kind of coordinate their EHRs so that hopefully if somebody's identified at risk while in the DOD, there'll be just a wraparound bubble, if you will, placed as this person separates. But I've also learned that the average time between leaving the service and your first appointment at the VA, the minimal time is 6 months. And yet most suicides occur within the first 6 months. I've asked the VA this, and the VA says that, listen, they do everything they can to go to that point where somebody is separating, and to, as you point out, when you signed up, nobody told you about benefits. When you left, nobody told you about benefits. To do the best they can to tell people about benefits and get them lined up with the services they need. So I guess my question to you, and maybe you'll have to survey your members and get back to me, is to what degree is that working? and to what degree it may not matter what somebody does when they depart the service, they're just going to have a rocky time, or no, the VA could do a better job. What are your thoughts on that?
A lot of that is on veteran service organizations. We're out there. We get to people. We want them to come and join us, see us. We can tell them what their benefits are. We can let them know that VA is available. However, in TAP, we do not have our own accredited service officers. So that's missing. That is the one time we can get somebody right before they leave service and tell them, these VA benefits are available. You need to take advantage of them. And again, we do it at no cost. If that's not being taught in TAP, if we have a contractor who is merely reading a piece of paper saying, yes, your benefits are this, and they drone on and then they go to the next topic, that's not going to stick with a separating troop. We need to be there. We need to show them that veteran service organizations like the Veterans of Foreign Wars care. Give us a few moments in that 5-day TAP curriculum to tell them, we're here. We know what you've been through. We can tell you how you can better help yourself. So that's on us. Veteran service organizations have to do more, but VA needs to meet with us and allow us to do that.
Thank you for your perspective, your honesty, and your offer to continue your service. With that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Radewagen.
Thank you, Chairman Tester, Chairman Takano, and ranking members Moran and Bost. Thank you all to the VSOs for your testimony. I've been on the Veterans Affairs Committee for 4 terms now, and I cannot understate how important these regular joint hearings are. Our VSOs are the gatekeepers for our veterans' voices in Washington. The work you all do to ensure that our veterans are afforded the benefits and services they've earned is so important, and I want to thank you for all you do and for your service to our nation. I want to extend a special mahalo to the VFW Hawaiian delegation for making the effort each year to reach out to my office and brief my staff on your work. Thank you for all you do on behalf of our Pacific veterans as we move forward with the second session of this Congress and continue to address veterans' issues. I know that your priorities and goals will be at the forefront of our mission to improve the lives of our veterans. Your priorities are my priorities. We'll continue to work on comprehensive toxic exposure reform and ensure vets are receiving care and compensation for the health conditions and illnesses associated with the toxic exposures and environmental hazards they encountered in service. We also aim to reduce and eventually eliminate veteran suicide, military sexual trauma, and ensure that all of our service members have better access to mental health care. I hope to continue serving on the Veterans Affairs Committee and achieve these and all the other legislative goals on behalf of our veterans. I want you to know that my colleagues and I on both sides of the aisle and in both chambers value your input and hold your efforts in the very highest regard. Thank you again for being here today, and thank you for your service to our grateful nation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield.
Representative Brownlee.
Thank you, Chairman Tester. And thank you, Commander, for being here, and thank you and all the men and women that you represent. I thank you for your service, and really I thank you for your continued service to reach out in your communities to help and support veterans that need your help. So thank you very, very much for that. Commander, I recently introduced a bill that we're calling the Elizabeth Dole Act of 2022. And this bill is really about addressing long-term care for our veterans, for both our senior veterans and for our disabled veterans. I think within the veteran population, 50% of the veteran population is 65 years or older. Still the preponderance of care tends to be institutionalized care, nursing homes, I'm trying to move away from that paradigm. I think every veteran, if they can receive care in their home, want to receive care in their home. I think that's where we need to go. And I think it's a win-win solution because I think by so doing, we can actually save money and provide, I think, better care and better quality care. So that money savings we can reinvest into other needed programs to serve our veterans. So I don't know if you're familiar with the bill, but I wanted to ask you about it and ask if you think we're moving in the right direction. Do you support the bill, and are we moving in the right direction? And how do you think your members are feeling?
Thank you, ma'am. I am familiar with your bill, and VFW fully supports that bill. It is our opinion that veterans serve with dignity, they have lived with dignity, and they have the right to care with dignity at their home. We really appreciate you putting that forward, and our team is here to help you in any way to move that bill further.
Well, thank you for that, Commander. That's music to my ears, and I really look forward to working with you on it. I agree with you. I think it's extremely important, and I think we need to make sure we get it through the House and through the Senate, Mr. Chairman, and signed by our president. So with that, I will yield back, and thank you for the opportunity.
Senator Bozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all so much for being here and all you represent. Last several years, we've been able to enact a lot of legislation, realizing that these aren't give-me's, these are earned benefits. But we simply wouldn't have gotten that done without our veteran service organizations, and nobody does a better job than you all. So give yourselves a pat on the back, and we especially thank you. We also want to thank the auxiliaries. In the reality, we know who does all the work. My wife reminds me also that they're also not only the worker bees, the ones that get all the work done, they're also the brains many times. So we do appreciate them also. The Mission Act was essential for providing veterans with timely and quality health care. As I travel across Arkansas, particularly in rural areas, I've heard that care being referred and scheduled in the community care takes longer than before. Are you hearing from veterans that care being referred to the community is taking longer to get scheduled? And if so, why do you think that is? Commander.
Empirically, we find that the data show that access to health care times is actually doing quite well. However, anecdotally, we hear from our veterans who are concerned that they're not getting care in a timely manner. I believe that's more, again, on veteran service organizations to properly assist our veterans, to let them know that if you need something today, if it's not critical, you may not get in today. But nonetheless, when you go through the VA system and you use the Mission Act, you are going to get care faster than if you went out into the private sector. So I think it's a matter of changing public opinion, and you do that one person at a time by reaching out and explaining what the system is and how it really works.
Right. We appreciate that. I'm an optometrist by training, and it is difficult to access care in the community. So again, that's very helpful. One of the most common concerns I also hear from veterans in Arkansas is how long it takes the National Personnel Records Center in St. Louis to respond to requests from veterans for records. I understand some of this was caused by COVID and the workforce capacity limits placed by local officials. Have you heard also that this is an issue among your members, and how big of an issue has this become? As the country returns to its pre-pandemic normalcy, what recommendations do you have for us to try to help expedite the records process and going forward prevent something like this from happening again?
First, if a veteran can't access military records, then we are all just doing a disservice to that veteran. How can they access VA health care and benefits if they can't prove they were in this service? To that end, we are doing everything we can, and because this is a critical thing to me, I would like Mr. Murray to enlighten.
Senator Bozeman, until very recently, that center was working at about 25% capacity. Some of the veterans who need those records right now are some of our older veterans who don't have the time to wait. It's also continuing to grow the current backlog by not being able to take care of those. We need to make sure that that center is working at full capacity, obviously as safely as possible, but we need to get that job done. They need to be working at 100% to take care of the veterans who need it now.
Well, I agree totally. Again, thank you all. Thank you so much for all that you represent and just the wonderful work that you do. Appreciate it.
Representative Rosendale.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it. Commander Michalczyk, bad actors that you were referring to earlier that are taking advantage of our veterans and making these phone calls and getting them to invest in things that probably aren't giving them much of a return. Unfortunately, the Veterans Administration is subject to the same type of deception and lost investment as those veterans are. For example, are you familiar with the Cerner system that has been contracted by Veterans Administration for the EHR?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay. Are you aware that they have been working on this system for approximately 18 months at the Spokane Veterans Hospital?
Yes, sir.
Are you aware that there are 500 safety violation claims that took place there?
I am aware of the violations. Yes, sir.
Okay. Are you aware of the poll that was conducted of their entire staff, where 80% of their staff said they were considering other employment opportunities as a direct result of the Cerner program that's being implemented there?
I have heard that. Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you know that after 18 months and $2.7 billion that we still don't have a fully functional system at that one facility, which we were supposed to be rolling out to all 179 VA hospitals across the nation?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Doesn't sound like a great investment. We had assurances from Secretary McDonough that he was not going to move forward until that system was fully functional in Spokane. And yet right now we have a schedule to start rolling this out at the Columbus facility and in Walla Walla. Would you say that if this is not fully functional, can I receive from you assurances that you would give us in writing your opposition to rolling it out in any other facilities?
At this time, I can't say that, sir. Reason being, a lot of these violations were missed referrals or erroneous medications. We look at that as insufficient training and missed opportunities. The mere fact that this is not working at this one location in Spokane should not hinder us from beginning this at another location. Use the lessons learned, plus and minus, to create another system at another location, and we continue to move forward. If we wait on one location to determine whether it's going to pass or fail, we will never get the proper systems in place to help veterans.
So you think that it's wise to roll out a system that's not working, that we've spent $2.7 billion on other facilities?
If we look at DOD using the same system, it works there. And that's what I was talking about, the training and the missed opportunities. We do not throw the baby out with the bathwater. We have to look at it holistically. If it's working somewhere else, then it must be working somehow. Let's put that together. Again, best practices from DOD, worst practices from Spokane. Let's move together and get something working. But if we wait and do nothing, people die.
Mr. Chair, I see I'm out of time. I'll yield back.
Representative Pappas.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. And I want to thank Commander, you and your team for your presentation today and your ongoing partnership, which I think really makes a difference and helps point our committees in the House and Senate in the right direction. I also want to thank any of my friends from the New Hampshire VFW that are watching in Crystal City. I always appreciate hearing from them. So, Commander, I want to ask you a question. I've heard from some constituents about a really disturbing practice. It's the issue of unaccredited claim consultants. I'd refer to them as claim sharks that are charging veterans thousands of dollars just for filing disability benefits claims, a service that we know otherwise can be free or provided by VSOs or other advocates. So because they're unaccredited, these claim sharks aren't subject to VA standards, and they avoid regulatory oversight. They target veterans with exploitative practices, financial exploitation. They engage in predatory and other unethical practices. So I'm just curious if VFW shares concerns about these claim sharks, and if you think it's a problem that Congress should be addressing.
Well, I thank you very much for that. Again, being an attorney, I see the ads all the time on the television, and it makes me cringe how these predatory practices, they do prey on unsuspecting victims. When it comes to unaccredited claims people, I'm sorry, I lost track. When it comes to unaccredited claims servicers, why can't we go after them? Do we have a law that says we'll only pull over a person who has a valid driver's license? No, we pull them over. If they don't have a valid driver's license, they can get a penalty. So let's open the aperture. Let's go after anybody, whether they're unaccredited or accredited. If they're involved in predatory practices that involve veterans' claims, we should be able to go after them and put them out of business. The VFW provides no-cost veteran service. That's what we should be shouting from the rooftops.
Thanks for highlighting that work. And I know we're planning a hearing in our committee in the House, and we'd love to keep you apprised of that, and hopefully can continue to work with you on that issue. One final thing I have, you talked a little bit about parity, and I just know from my experience in New Hampshire, the Guard has served us in tremendous ways, especially over the last few years. We've seen their sacrifice on full display. And we know that during times of national emergency, they're called upon, relied upon, but aren't always credited for those activations as they should be. I've got a bill I'm introducing. It's the Record of Military Service for Members of the Armed Forces Act. It looks to ensure that all members of the reserve components, including the Guard, are provided the same DD 214 form as other members of the armed forces. So just if you have any quick thoughts on reserve components without a standardized DD 214 and why this legislation potentially could be important.
I firmly believe that total force means total force, not separate force. We should not have different pieces of paper for different components. If you served, you should get the document. We talked about a DD 214, whatever we call it. Anybody who serves in any capacity should have the same document, so when they show it to somebody, they don't have to explain, well, I was in this branch, I did this, that's why my form looks different. Let's standardize, let's modernize, and let's get with it.
Thanks, Commander. I yield back.
Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Commander, thank you to you and your team. Really appreciate all the great work and guidance you provide this committee. I want to do a shout out to some of my fellow veterans from Alaska who I'm sure are watching. You know, we have more veterans per capita than any state in the country. We're very proud of that. The committee knows that because I say it in every hearing, but I'm also a proud member of the VFW Post 9785 in Eagle River, Alaska. Any of you gentlemen ever been there, had a beer there? Yes?
I had a Coke there, sir.
Oh, okay.
It's a beautiful post.
Well, you know, next time you're in Alaska, come on out. We'll have a Coke or a beer or whatever you and your team want to have. So I want to talk about two issues in my time here. I think it was, you know, at the State of the Union last night, I'll be honest here, there were some areas that I wasn't fully supportive of the President's vision or ideas, but I will tell you this, I think it was very appreciated the amount of time he spent on the toxic exposure and burn pit issue. This is a topic I've actually discussed at length with the President himself. I know he cares about it. This is something Senator Manchin and I have been working on for quite some time, our bill S437, which was one of the first that kind of got out there and looked at the issues of liability. Can you just explain briefly why you think this is such an important issue for all of our veterans, but the VFW in particular? Not focused on any one particular bill, but the need to get on it, address it, and get in front of it so we don't have an Agent Orange type of situation like we had in Vietnam, you know, a generation ago.
I'm going to let Mr. Murray take this one only because I'm not quite sure what you're asking, and I don't want to mislead you in any way.
Great. Mr. Murray.
So, Senator, we support that bill as
S437?
Yes, sir.
Good,
But amongst others. But the reason it's important, and the VFW, I believe, represents it very well. We're a multi-generational organization. Some of these comprehensive bills cover folks from Iraq and Afghanistan and K2 and the Gulf War.
Right.
And Vietnam. It's needed because this is long overdue. Service and toxic exposure are synonymous. Your service, our service, it's something that every single day we could wake up and be exposed to some kind of nasty substances. That's why these bills, the comprehensive bills to take care of everybody, foreign, domestic, past, present, and future, is incredibly important.
Great, thank you for that. Real quick, because I'm almost out of time here, but you did mention, Commander, in your testimony, the importance of telehealth, particularly serving rural veterans. Our committee has been very focused on that. Can you expand just a bit more on your focus in your testimony on the importance of telehealth for our rural veterans? I think it's a great area of focus for the VFW because a lot of our veterans live in rural communities, rural states.
This is the 21st century. Why aren't we using telehealth? The recent pandemic has shown us that we can do things using computers, using telehealth. Why not? People who want to say, let's go back to the old ways, they're just wrong. And people who live in rural areas who can't drive 50, 100 miles for a checkup, this is going to save lives. If we can't use technology, then we are lost. There's no reason for us to go back to the way we did things before. Let's learn our lessons from COVID-19. Let's increase the use of telehealth. Let's get more people involved in the VA system who never were able to get involved before because it was too far. This is one way, using outreach, that we can get more people in. They will get their earned health benefits and their earned claims benefits.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Sablin.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to welcome all of our witnesses. I have truly enjoyed this annual convening of hearings to listen to our VSOs because you know us better than many of us at times of what your veterans want. And I'm particularly fond of today's hearing because VFW is the only VSO in my district in the Northern Marianas. And I'd like to give a shout out and a welcome to Washington, D.C. to retired Lieutenant Colonel and former Vietnam prisoner of war, Mr. Peter Callahan. So Pete, welcome to D.C. and I understand you're in Crystal City. I want to thank again VFW. I have a question, if I may, Commander. You mentioned several times the importance of communicating, whether it's between DOD, VA, or between the veteran and his or her provider. I think you would agree with me that some of the need for communication rests with those veterans who are in the most remotest part of this world. So I have introduced the bill, HR 3730, that would establish a VA advisory committee for veterans residing in the U.S. territories and then the freely associated states. I would appreciate if you and your colleagues would look over that legislation and see if you could support it. It really makes a lot of difference for the veterans in these parts of the world.
Thank you, sir. I can tell you that we unequivocally support your bill. This is the 21st century. There is technology. The world is getting smaller. We can reach any portion of this earth using satellites, using communications. There is no reason we can't reach somebody in the Northern Marianas and get them a VA appointment in a timely manner.
Thank you, Commander, again, and thank you to VFW for being the first and so far only VSO in my district in the Northern Marianas. Chairman Tester, are you back?
Representative Slotkin.
Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for addressing both the House and Senate on issues that we know are really important. In Michigan, we're recovering. I'm from Michigan. We're recovering from Punchki Day, not the New Orleans version, but the Michigan version, which is a very heavy Polish donut that we all eat. Thank you for all that you all do. I think we were all happy to hear the amount of time the president talked about veterans issues, and the one that's personal for me is burn pits. I'm a former CIA officer, served 3 tours alongside the military and lived near a burn pit, as we almost all of us did in Iraq. And myself and Congressman Meyer, a Republican from Michigan, who also served in Iraq, we have this Veterans Burn Pit Exposure Recognition Act. And we're basically trying to make sure, I think all of us are trying to make sure that burn pits don't become the Agent Orange of the post 9/11 generation, right? That we don't wait 40 years to recognize the exposure as we did with our Vietnam veterans, and we do better. Can you talk to us about what we need to do? Obviously, the legislation is critical, but what else can we do to raise attention, to get the focus on this issue so that we don't have that clock going for 40 years?
First, ma'am, I can tell you we support you and your bill 100%. There is no reason that any veteran should have to wait the 40 or 50 years that our Vietnam veterans had to wait. That was a travesty, and we here today can work to say that will never happen again. We know what's going on. We know that it wasn't just Vietnam veterans. It's veterans of all ages, all times. As far as recognition, I have 1.5 million members of my organization. And it's very easy for me through our VFW Action Corps to send a notice out, and it reaches all of those veterans instantly and tells them about your bill. So we and all of the other VSOs have a captive audience. We will work with you. My colleagues at the table will reach out to you. We will find out the particulars, and we will work with you to get the voice out. When you have a lot of people behind it, we all vote, and we will reach out to our representatives and ask them to support your bill.
I appreciate that. I think the VFW is an amazing organization, and it is just very clear to me. Sometimes I talk to folks who aren't veterans, and they just, when I talk about burn pits, they just a little bit of a blank stare. You know, it hasn't really seeped into the bloodstream the way Agent Orange has, and anything we can do together collaboratively to get the word out and make it more of a public issue, I'd appreciate. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Representative Ruiz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How long is long enough? How long must our service members wait before their suffering from exposure to burn pits and other toxins is recognized? How long must they shoulder the burden to prove their pain or illness is real and a result of their service? For our Vietnam veterans, the answer was nearly 20 years before the VA granted a presumption of service connection for many illnesses and diseases. And shockingly, they are still fighting. It has now been over 2 decades since 9/11, and the VA has estimated that 3.5 million of our post 9/11 veterans served in areas where they may have been exposed to burn pits and other toxic substances. And yet the VA is still not covering the healthcare veterans who sustained these injuries while serving our country. Why is that? What have we not learned our lesson? We cannot afford to repeat history by denying our service members proper benefits and care. Congress must act now. Studies on the health effects of open air waste burning can be traced back to the 1990s when concerns about health risks began to rise from returning Gulf War veterans. Yet we continue to argue that more studies are needed before we can prove our veterans' illnesses are related to their service. As a physician and public health expert, I understand the necessity for studies and the importance of understanding the science behind illness and disease, but that has been done here. The evidence has shown us time and time again that there is a connection between the illnesses veterans are being diagnosed with and their service near burn pits. It doesn't take research to understand that carcinogens cause cancer, and carcinogens are found in the burn pits' toxic smoke. Years later, the veterans are becoming delayed casualties of war as they develop long-term respiratory illnesses and cancers because of their exposure. We don't need more studies to understand where the illness and cancers are coming from. We need service. We need to follow the evidence and presume service connection for all 23 illnesses listed in the Honoring Our Pact Act. My first question, Commander Fritz, can you explain why it is imperative that any legislation passed by Congress includes a presumption of service connection and why anything less is a dereliction of our duty?
Yes, sir. Why should we put the burden on a veteran to show that something they breathed caused them harm? It is so easy for Congress right now, and as a medical professional, you can tell that causation and effect, you know what's there. If something happens to a veteran, we can tell that. And I say the time is now to pass the Pact Act. So we put these presumptions in, so when a veteran comes forward and says, I served in this location, the VA must say, we will presume that you have these conditions and we will take care of you.
Thank you very much.
Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the work in our committee to get a bill passed out that had elements of the TEAM Act that my office worked on. It was great, unanimous bill. Glad to get it out of the Senate and looking forward to getting it to the President's desk. I think when we're talking, incidentally, I was pleased to hear what President Biden had to say last night about presumptions. I do believe that we need to provide clarity and certainty by codifying some of these presumptions moving forward. I think most people, if they're watching, they don't know what a presumption is. What people need to understand is when you've got a veteran who's going in, thinks they've got an illness, knows that they had some sort of exposure, they're already in a crisis situation. We do need to flip the script and make it easier for them to get the care they deserve. So I'll continue to work on that. I want to talk a little bit, first off, about telehealth and what we saw during COVID times. You know, we took emergency measures, expanded access to telehealth, and I, for one, think that we found some really good uses for it that I believe should be a part of standard operating procedure. Can y'all give me any sense of where you are on that, any specific areas that we should focus on?
Mr. Gallucci is our expert on that, and I want to give him some time to speak.
No. Thank you, Comrade Commander, and thank you, Senator Tillis. This is something that we think a lot about. The VFW is one of the pilot organizations for VA's Project Atlas. All 5 of our sites are operational and have been for quite some time. We've seen the most patients through Project Atlas, but we've only seen 100 patients. What we're asking VA now is there a more efficient way to deliver this telehealth? You know, one of our strongest assets in the Veterans of Foreign Wars is the physical infrastructure we have around the country. We truly believe in a program like this, and we want to lean forward with that infrastructure to help deliver telehealth. But is there an easier way to do it? Is there a better way to get that message out to the veterans who can use it? You know, our posts have leaned forward throughout the pandemic, coming together and sewing masks for veterans, or even hosting VA for things like vaccination clinics and also mobile vet centers or whatever it took. I think we can lean forward with that infrastructure similarly to reach veterans where they need that help. But also there are the broadband deserts for highly rural veterans. And we're really looking forward. VA is convening a meeting of organizations here very shortly about what we can do about that, and the VFW is proud to come to the table there.
Well, hopefully with our bipartisan support of the infrastructure bill and $65 billion going into broadband in particular, that we'll also see some benefit to the unserved or underserved areas across the country. I'm about to run out of time. I did want to also say that we're having a hearing. I'm the ranking member on Personnel Subcommittee, and a part of this discussion about toxic exposures, we got to do better at actually predicting when we're exposing servicemen and women to toxic substances a lot earlier in the life cycle. So we're having a hearing this week to talk about what we should do to make sure that we're capturing information in the electronic health record, that we're doing a better job of setting up protocols if we even suspect that something could actually result in a bad outcome for a service member long before they become a veteran. I think if we do that, we get ahead of the curve, then we're going to be much more likely to be in a position to provide treatment, and then maybe even look out to veterans and identify them as being at risk long before they know they may have been. And hopefully through that, we can not have to go through Agent Orange, burn pits, and the next potential disaster for our veterans, and you can count on me to continue to work for it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Hassan.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and ranking members for this hearing and this panel. And thank you to our witnesses for your service and the work that you do to support our veterans. Before I ask a question, I want to recognize the testimony provided already by our witnesses on veterans exposed to toxic substances, as we've just been talking about. I was glad to hear the VA announced yesterday that it will propose adding rare respiratory cancers as a presumed service connection condition, a measure that my colleagues and I have pushed for in response to the needs of veterans. The VA and Congress need to continue to work together so that veterans exposed to toxic substances have the health care and disability benefits that they have earned and that they deserve. And I'll continue with working with my colleagues to ensure that Congress passes bipartisan legislation. Now, I did want to start with a question, Commander, to you about the Home Loan Guarantee Program. This Congress, I led a bipartisan call for improvements to the VA Home Loan Guarantee Program. I consistently hear from Granite State veterans about how the current housing market affects their ability to use this program. I was certainly glad to see that VFW's written testimony is consistent with my push for conducting further outreach to lenders, real estate agents, and veterans on how to best utilize the VA Home Loan Guarantee Program. But, Commander, what further recommendations does VFW have for Congress so that we can support veterans who want to buy a home using this VA program but are currently unable to do so?
Well, the first thing, you do need to make it easier.
Yeah.
As a recipient of a VA home loan many years ago, I had trouble getting through that. Nobody understood it. There was extra paperwork. Why do we have to do this? Why can't we charge you more? All of those issues are problems.
Yeah.
And we can fix this, and it's all a matter of information, enlightening, getting people to understand what's going on. My feeling is there is no problem that can't be solved if you put more information out to people so they can understand what the problem is.
Right. And simplify the process, though, as well. So I appreciate that. One more question in my remaining time, again for you, Commander. New Hampshire National Guardsmen and reservists swear to defend the Constitution and this country just as their active duty counterparts do, and they deserve the same respect and recognition. That's why I introduced bipartisan legislation with Senators Shaheen, Kramer, and Hoeven to reform the Veterans Cemetery Grants Program to ensure that all members of reserve components and the National Guard are eligible to be buried in state veterans cemeteries. I was glad to see that the VFW note their support of this legislation in today's written testimony. Commander, can you speak to VFW's support for this bill and why burial eligibility should not restrict state cemeteries from receiving critical VA cemetery grant funding?
Yes, ma'am, we do support you 100%. Again, it goes back to total force.
Right.
If someone joins the military, whether they're in the Guard, the Reserve, or the active component, they have served. They deserve all of the rights available to them, and that includes being able to be buried in the hallowed ground of a veteran cemetery. We fully support that. Some people don't get activated. That's great. Thank God they didn't have to go into harm's way, but nonetheless, they put the uniform on and they served. So we need to take care of them, not only in life, but in death also.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So we have Representatives Mervyn, Banks, and Gallego. That will be that for this panel because we got another one to get to. So Representative Mervyn, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Commander Michalczyk, VFW is a current user of the Veteran Benefits Management System, and we know from independent budget recommendations for VA that modernization of this system is a priority for you. I have two questions. What is the current state of the system, and how is that impacting your ability to assist veterans with access to benefits? And then secondly, is VBMS technologically equipped to handle the anticipated influx of toxic exposure claims following the anticipated congressional action on this issue today?
I can certainly answer that, but I have an expert sitting next to me on my left, and he is going to provide you with more information than you could ever want on this topic.
Thank you, Commander. I'll keep every bit of information possible to a minimum, but the VBMS system is not an entirely comprehensive system to take care of benefits management. It's also about a dozen years old. It's time for a revamp of that system. In terms of IT, 12 years old is a lifetime. So it's time that we invest heavily into the IT infrastructure of VA to improve their benefits management system. And to your question about is VBMS capable of handling the workload if we were to suddenly flip the switch for the Pact Act, for example, we can't hire enough people to adjudicate those claims in a timely fashion without also an IT upgrade for that system. We believe, similar to what happened with the digital GI Bill, a digital benefits upgrade is necessary in order to make the people that are doing that work more efficient every single day.
I thank you very much. I appreciate that. And as the chairman of Technology Modernization, the subcommittee chair, we will do everything in our power to make sure that that infrastructure is moving in the right direction to be able to get the tools necessary to be efficient when we come to processing those claims. I thank you for your opinion, and with that, I yield back.
Representative Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commander, as you know, many of us are concerned about the mental health of our veterans, and I'm concerned that the endless COVID lockdowns have forced many of our veterans into isolation, cost them their jobs, and diminished many of their healthcare opportunities. Commander Michalczyk, how has COVID affected veteran mental health from your perspective, and what can we do more of to alleviate some of those concerns and problems?
Well, certainly isolation will bring a person down, and if they're not able to get out to see a physician, see their doctors, they don't get asked those questions of how you are feeling. I'm very proud to say that our VFW posts are opening now. We are open. We are available. We are pockets of patriotism. We are there for a person to come in and sit down and talk to a VFW member about how things are going, because it doesn't make any difference what war you served in or what uniform you wore. The fact is, we all went through the same thing. And if a person's not feeling right, they can come in and sit down. Maybe they go to Eagle River and have a Coke. But when they do that, they're sharing and they're talking. And when they can do that, we can help with their mental health. I'm not sure what more VA can do, but we can do it on our side of the fence by reaching out to our fellow veterans and say, we understand. Come sit down with us. We can help you.
Thank you for that. I think that's very important. Can you also talk for a minute about how COVID has affected veteran employment and what we can do more generally to support veterans finding employment coming out of the pandemic?
Well, the great program Vet Tech has come about. Instead of going to a 4-year school and using your GI Bill benefits, you can go to a shortened school to learn a quick skill, a digital skill, information technology skill. In a few short months, you can come out, and studies have shown that within 7 months of graduating with a certificate, our veterans are making over $60,000 a year on average. So that's how we come out of the pandemic. That's how we get veterans back into the workforce. Don't force them to go to a 4-year degree. Let them go and take a program that will get them a skill, a life skill, that they can use immediately. Because when a person works, they have worth. And when they have worth, they don't kill themselves.
Thank you for that. As a proud VFW member, I appreciate your feedback and your attendance here today. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Representative Gallego.
Thank you. Mr. Milchek, your testimony discusses the need to improve suicide prevention not only among veterans, but among active duty service members too. That's why I joined my colleague, Rep. Miller Meeks, in introducing the Save Our Service Member Act, which includes some of the recommendations in your testimony, such as evaluating the effectiveness of DoD's suicide interventions and improving coordination with DoD. Can you expand why it's important for DoD to streamline its own suicide prevention efforts and how that can help improve outcomes for veterans down the line as well? And also, can you also share any additional recommendations you have in this space?
DoD is the employer of these service members. If we find that if our employees, our service members, are committing suicide, we owe it to our service members to get better training. I was in the service. I worked as a civilian in the Department of Defense. We did have a lot of suicide awareness training, but it was the same training every 6 months. You just clicked through. There was nothing new. We need to revamp that training. We need to get people to understand that this is serious. This is not just a, oh, I have to get this done. How fast can I push the button? If we push this to the side and make it just another ancillary training thing, people won't take it seriously. If we take it seriously, we will reduce veteran and active duty suicide.
Thank you. As you know, the House has taken up the Honoring Our Pact Act this week to provide comprehensive services to those veterans who were exposed to burn pits and other toxins while serving. I myself was exposed to burn pits in Iraq, and I know many of your members have also suffered from this exposure and have waited too long for care. I just want to ask you today, what is your message for members of Congress that are on the fence about this important piece of legislation, or those who say we can't provide this care because it's too expensive?
I'll take the last part first. This is not an expense. This is taking care of veterans who have earned their benefits. This is taking care of sick and wounded and injured veterans. There's just no sense. How could any right-thinking American not vote for this Pact Act? I spoke about it this morning. I spoke about it here. This is what we call the no-brainer. How can you not honor America's veterans? They went in harm's way for you. They came home. Don't forget them. There's nothing more I can say other than if you're on the fence, you need to get off the fence. You need to pick a side. History does not like people who do not decide. History will recall this week when the House is working on the Pact Act, and history will remember those people who did not vote to pass the Pact Act.
Awesome. You cannot say that any better. Thank you so much. I yield back my time.
That's the end of panel one. I want to thank the VFW for being here. And I want to say, Commander Michalczyk, to my memory, I can't think of a national commander who's done a better job than you did today. So I want to appreciate you all and your input. Now we'll introduce the second panel. I will leave you guys of your spots, and we'll set up the second panel, which is an incredibly important panel, where we have multiple veteran services and advocacy organizations who represent and assist a diverse cross-section of veterans from around the country. I want to tell the presenters here today, you have 5 minutes, and there are 9 of you, I believe. And so time is money, as always, but as concise as you can be, the better off it's going to be, because we want to hear your input. And I'm going to list these in the speaking order that's there. First, we're going to start with Jeremy Butler, Chief Executive Officer of the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, otherwise known as IAVA. Jeremy is here in person. Next up to speak will be Michael Lennington, Chief Executive Officer of the Wounded Warrior Project, who is also here in person. The third person to speak is going to be Jack Mcmanus, who is here virtually. He is the President of the Vietnam Veterans of America. Then Gregory Hayoun, the National Commander at AMVETS, and he is here in person. Next up, we have Catherine Monet, the Chief Executive Officer of the National Coalition of Homeless Veterans. It's here virtually. Next up is Lori Manning, Director of Government Operations of the Service Women's Action Network, otherwise known as SWAN. She is here in person. Next up is Joseph D. Mcneil, National President of the Blinded Veterans Association, otherwise known as BVA, and Joseph is here virtually. Next up, we have Victor Lagroon, the Director of the Black Veterans Empowerment Council, and he is here in person. And last, but certainly not least, we have Thomas Palladino, President of the National Association of State Directors of Veterans Affairs and Executive Director of the Texas Veterans Commission. That is a mouthful, and he is here virtually. We will start with you, Jeremy. As I said earlier, 5 minutes. We appreciate you guys, appreciate all you guys, and we look forward to your testimony. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Chairman Tester, Chairman Takano, Ranking Member Moran, Ranking Member Bost, and distinguished members of the committees. On behalf of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My submitted written testimony covers several IAVA priorities, but for my opening statement, I'll focus on the one which is literally closest to all of us in terms of a path to success, the overdue need for comprehensive toxic exposure legislation. This is my 4th year in a row testifying before this joint body as CEO of IAVA, and every year I've discussed the needs to address the health issues brought on by 20 years of burn pit usage in Iraq and Afghanistan. Small steps have been made, but like the incremental moves taken to address Agent Orange, we are much too late in the government owning up to this self-inflicted wound. Veterans are sick, and too many have already died. Even though IAVA has been discussing this for more than 4 years, by no means were we the first or the loudest to raise this issue. In fact, the danger of burn pit exposure was raised nearly from the beginning. In 2004, Dr. Robert Miller from Vanderbilt University began one of the first studies into the links between burn pits and illnesses when several seemingly fit soldiers were sent to him from Fort Campbell after failing fitness tests and presenting unexplained respiratory issues on their return from Iraq. After performing lung biopsies, he found that dozens were suffering from constrictive bronchiolitis, which didn't show up on regular exams. The Army's fix to this problem was to stop sending soldiers to see him. In 2006, an Air Force officer, back from serving as bioenvironmental flight commander for Joint Base Balad, wrote, "In my professional opinion, there's an acute health hazard for individuals. There's also the possibility for chronic health hazards associated with the smoke." Another officer, back from serving as chief of aeromedical services for the 332nd Air Expeditionary Wing at Balad, wrote, "In my professional opinion, the known carcinogens and respiratory sensitizers released into the atmosphere by the burn pit present both an acute and chronic health hazard to our troops and the local population." Their writing was in reference to the burn pit at the largest U.S. base in Iraq, home to 25,000 U.S. military personnel and several thousand contractors, where even though the military had 3 clean-burning incinerators operating, officials acknowledged that the burn pit was still taking in 147 tons of waste per day, significantly more than half the daily output at Balad. And what was being burned included styrofoam, unexploded ordnance, petroleum products, plastics, rubber, dining facility trash, paint and solvents, and medical waste that included amputated limbs, all resulting in likely exposure to contaminants that included benzene, arsenic, freon, carbon monoxide, ethyl benzene, formaldehyde, hydrogen cyanide, nitrogen dioxide, sulfuric acid, and xylene. In 2012, a former epidemiologist for VA testified before Congress that VA officials were manipulating or hiding data that supported veterans' claims of illnesses related to burn pits. We know that the DoD contracted management of the burn pits out to private companies such as KBR, even though the military's rules prohibited long-term use of burn pits. And when veterans tried to sue KBR because of illnesses they believed were caused by the burn pits, U.S. judges ruled that KBR had little discretion into how to dispose of the waste, as they were under military control and the use of the burn pits was a military decision. The judges further referred to the issue as a quote-unquote political question that Congress and the President should resolve, not the courts. And we know that in January of 2019, the Supreme Court rejected those veterans' appeals, let stand the circuit court ruling, and decided that more than 60 separate burn pit-related lawsuits could not move forward. Which brings us to today, and this body having the opportunity to do what the court stated Congress needs to do and resolve this political question. Passing the Honoring Our Pact Act in the House and the Cost of War Act in the Senate are how that is accomplished. Half measures, phased approaches, and anything short of comprehensive toxic exposure legislation would leave this issue unresolved, leave countless veterans responsible for continuing to fight their own government for what they were promised, and leave a gaping, self-inflicted wound to continue those who served honorably. We know that we've already lost veterans to toxic exposure-induced illnesses. We know that many others are sick, and we know that more will die. What we don't know is how much longer Congress will delay and make excuses. The only reason that comprehensive toxic exposure legislation has not passed is because of the financial cost. But there was virtually no debate by this body during the 20 years that the country sent millions to war where they were repeatedly exposed to the hazards of burn pits. Burn pits that were banned from use in the United States as far back as the 1970s. The Pact Act is not partisan legislation. It was not created by politicians of either party. It was, in fact, the result of a coalition of veterans groups representing the broad diversity of America's veteran population who came together to create legislation that would address the unmet needs of those suffering from toxic exposure-related illnesses. So on behalf of the 3.5 million veterans who were exposed to burn pits and other airborne hazards, and on behalf of the veterans behind the nearly 70% of burn pit-related claims that were denied by the VA, I implore you to pass the comprehensive toxic exposure legislation supported by nearly every veterans group in the country and finally keep America's promise to take care of those who fought to defend us. Thank you.
Wounded Warrior Project, Michael Lennington.
Thank you, Chairman Tester. Chairman, ranking members, and distinguished committee members, thank you for today's hearing. Wounded Warrior Project was founded in 2003 with a simple and clear message: to honor and empower wounded warriors. For nearly 20 years, the service members, veterans, families, and caregivers who we serve have been our inspiration for transforming the way America's veterans are empowered, employed, and engaged in our communities. And just as so many of us are inspired by the brave spirit of Ukrainians fighting to preserve their freedom, we're reminded of the privilege we have to serve so many Americans who have done the same to protect the liberties we cherish. Today, we are honoring their service by providing more than a dozen programs that promote mental, physical, and financial health and well-being. In 2021, we challenged ourselves to explore new ways to offer care and support to tens of thousands of wounded veterans, families, and caregivers. We did so through programs like our Warrior Care Network and Project Odyssey, where we connected warriors to more than 43,000 hours of PTSD treatment, find jobs, and social connection at a time when so many have felt the stress of an uncertain economy and isolation. We also reached out to more than 33,000 warriors who served in Afghanistan to offer care and support to any who needed it. We're also committed to raising awareness on policies most relevant to those we serve. Last week, that advocacy was delivered to many of you by warriors participating in our virtual Operation Advocacy. I'm here to reinforce their efforts by speaking to those issues. This year, our top priority is to support legislation that will guarantee access to health care and improve the disability benefit process for veterans who suffer toxic exposures in service. In our most recent survey, over 70% of warriors who served in Iraq and Afghanistan reported burn pit exposure, and the vast majority say it occurred on a daily basis. Now, many of them are suffering from serious respiratory conditions, cancers, and other illnesses. Alarmingly, 2/3 of them say their exposure-related disability claims have been denied, and some of them have died because of their illnesses. We cannot let this continue, and we were pleased last night to hear the President announce efforts to address the challenges of toxic exposures. Providing care and benefits to these warriors must be viewed as part of the cost of sending them to war. For this reason, Wounded Warrior Project strongly supports Chairman Tester's Cost of War Act and Chairman Takano's Honoring Our Pact Act, which would guarantee access to VA health care that does not expire, creates a presumption that certain diseases are related to exposure, and concedes that exposure occurred, finally providing post-9/11 veterans parity with what Congress has done for previous generations of exposed veterans. This is the comprehensive solution that warriors need and have earned. Secondly, I'd like to speak to the concerns being shared by many warriors and caregivers who have participated in VA's Comprehensive Caregiver Program. This program recently began its long overdue expansion to pre-9/11 veterans and caregivers, expansion that we were proud to support. But new regulations have put this critical program beyond the reach of many who need it. As predicted, many post-9/11 veterans and caregivers are expected to be removed from the program. Highly personal reassessments of legacy participants are well underway, and while VA should be commended for ensuring no sudden loss of benefits for these families, this year should invite a candid discussion on whether new regulations and new requirements are set in the right place to extend care and support to our most seriously injured warriors. We appreciate Secretary McDonough's recent commitment to ensure program decisions are accurate, consistent, and clearly communicated. In the end, our vision is to work with VA to ensure that this critical program continues to support veterans who require great care and attention. I'll close by touching on two other key priorities for the remainder of the 117th Congress. The first is to continue support for the growing population of women veterans. Congress can do this by expanding access to gender-specific care, fostering ongoing connection and support, building safe and welcoming VA environments, and providing coordination of care and benefits for survivors of military sexual trauma. The other priority is on mental health, which remains one of the most important challenges we face for post-9/11 veterans. Our most recent annual Warrior Survey shows that nearly 1 in 4 responding warriors had thoughts of suicide in the last year. This is a startling reminder that the VA must be a leader in evidence-based treatment and research and a champion of wider community efforts to prevent veteran suicide. The Post-9/11 Veteran Mental Health Care Improvement Act and the Strong Veterans Act are two initiatives that have our strong support. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my distinct honor to be here with you today, and I look forward to your questions.
Next, we have Jack Mcmanus from the Vietnam Veterans of America.
Good afternoon. I want to thank you all for the good work that you're doing for the American people, and particularly for our veterans and their families. This is not VBA's first time presenting to these joint hearings of the Congressional Committees on Veterans Affairs. We've been the old guys on the Hill for a long, long time. We are them old Vietnam vets. You see us walking your halls for many, many years. You know who we represent, and more importantly, you know what we stand for as citizens first and for all generations of veterans next. One of our missions is to ensure that the experiences of the Vietnam veteran generation is never repeated by our nation. Just as you know all about VBA, let it be said that we know all about you. We know that you work hard on these committees and you're motivated by your love of our country and your real and honest concern for those who chose to wear the uniform and sacrificed in so many ways for our still very young country. It is you, our noble congressional leaders, that will assure the spirit learned from our Vietnam vets' experiences will forever guide the consciousness, the respect, and the current and the future way veterans are valued and treated by our country. There are other organizations who we continue to work with after many years to help change the perception of the American military service members and their brave families. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial Foundation is celebrating the 40th anniversary of the wall dedication this year. After many years, all of us old Vietnam veterans are long gone. The 58,318 names etched on the big black marble slab will be there to remind future generations of Americans, no, never again. For over a century, our country has honored our military heroes who made the ultimate sacrifice under combat conditions or during battle. Their families are awarded the privilege of wearing the Gold Star pin to honor the lost child, lost spouse, or lost parent. VBA supports Congress in creating a means for recognizing and honoring the families of anyone who was lost during military service. We believe that this goal can be accomplished, and we will work with you to support the creation of a new honor, provided it does not diminish the traditions, criteria, and unique circumstances of the current Gold Star program. For 4 decades, VBA has kept the fullest possible accounting for all POWs, MIA service members as our solemn priority. We continue to support and collaborate with the National League of Families, the DPAA, and the Vietnamese veterans who are also working to identify their missing comrades in arms. Time is of the essence. The fullest possible accounting of American POWs has long been our solemn priority. We must insist that Congress fund the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency with what it is required to investigate all of the potential crash and burial sites and to recover and identify remains. We are amazed at the comprehensive way that this Congress is working to heal many of our veterans' wounds caused by exposure to toxic substances while serving our country. Thank you for including Vietnam and Agent Orange issues in the Honoring Our Pact Act. Some of the lingering life and death issues attributable to Agent Orange exposure are still unresolved for so many of our Vietnam vets after more than 50 years. Obviously, we are delighted with the possibility of seeing some relief and care for those still living toxic exposed veterans of Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Guam, and the American Samoas. The presumption of hypertension as an illness associated with Agent Orange exposure is long overdue and was previously mandated by previous legislation. VA's own research confirms this presumption, yet it still stonewalls those who are seriously afflicted. Many have died without care or treatment through existing laws, have determined they should have received this treatment, care, and treatment. This bill is so remarkable by the inclusion of a real structural process for determining the conditions of presumptive illness. It removes the burden from the shoulders of the individual veteran. It respects them to the point of providing immediate care, and it neither disrespects nor devalues the veteran in need of assistance. If Congress truly wants to provide solutions to the entire menu of toxic exposure issues, then VBA recommends from both our history and experience that piecemealing through phased legislation will never achieve a comprehensive solution. And unfortunately, many veterans will die waiting for the promise of future legislative phases to be approved or implemented. Since we're limited to 5 minutes, I want to close up by saying that VBA invites and VBMF invites the honorable members of both committees and fellow VSOs to join us at the Wall National Vietnam Veterans Day, March 29th, for a ceremony and reception to honor Vietnam vets. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, from AMVETS, we have Greg Hune.
Thank you, Chairman, ranking members, and members of this committee. As the largest veteran service organization representing all of America's veterans, AMVETS is honored to provide our legislative priorities for the remainder of the 117th Congress. Last Memorial Day weekend, AMVETS hosted our first Rowing to Remember pro-veterans demonstration ride here in Washington, D.C. This is the nation's largest veterans event, which brings together tens of thousands of veterans and supporters from across the United States, riding their motorcycles to demand continued and increased action for the 82,000 service members still missing in action, as well as raising awareness of the many veterans who died by suicide each day. This year's event will take place on May 29, 2022. We will never forget our POWs and our MIAs, and we won't stop fighting for real solutions to suicide crisis. 2021 was a tough year for veterans, and we expect it to have lasting repercussions. First, the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan increased the number of veterans approaching our HEAL team for assistance. Second, COVID has continued to kill and sicken many of our population, isolate others, stress our VA medical care employees, and leave many unemployed. Sexual assault survivors watched as senior senators on the Senate Armed Service Committee stripped language from Military Justice Improvement Act that would have removed sexual assault from the oversight of their chain of command. A betrayal from the leaders who are in positions to protect our troops. For the first time ever, the Pentagon denied veterans a permit for the annual Rowing to Remember Memorial Day ride. Most recently, our veterans and service members are watching the situation in Ukraine unfold. Our prayers are with the people of Ukraine, our troops, and our NATO allies. A fellow Kentuckian once said, "I'm a firm believer in the people. If given the truth, they can be depended upon to meet any national crisis. The great point is to bring the real facts." That was Abraham Lincoln. Here are the facts. We continue to average more than 6,000 veteran suicides every year, despite spending $15 billion a year on VA mental health and suicide programs. 50 to 90% of our veterans walk out of VA programs and services never completing the recommended number of visits. No business or nonprofit losing 50 to 90% of its customers would call that a success, nor would they scale that model. AMVET's #1 priority has and continues to be encouraging Congress to create and fund effective programs and services that significantly reduce suicide. Congress worked diligently to pass the John Scott Hannon Veterans Mental Health Care Act, Improvement Act of 2019. Nearly 2 years later, 12,000 veterans lost their lives and nothing but a static VA webpage. Is this what we call progress? Is this what the VA and Congress calls urgency? With the $15 billion annual budget for mental health, we could fund 60 Wounded Warrior Projects or DAVs. Does anyone feel like this funding is having the impact of 60 of our largest veteran nonprofits? We don't. We have scaled overpriced, underperforming models. Tens of thousands of veterans have died, yet Congress continues to support scaling broken options. Many members of Congress have continued to argue on behalf of this broken model while failing to do due diligence on the available alternatives, failing to look into the extraordinary dropout rates of VA programs and services, failing to hold meaningful hearings that include researchers that have highlighted the poor outcomes occurring at VA, failing to hold hearings that include individuals who have presented robust longitudinal data on new and novel approaches that are resulting in veterans living high-quality lives, failing to conduct significant oversight, travel to better understanding the available alternatives. Roughly 4 congressional committee staff are left to tackle this issue that results in more than 6,000 dead every year and $15 billion spent. That's 4 staff. Members of this committee, you are the board members that oversees a notoriously underperforming mental health system with a budget of 60 DAVs. Our veterans' lives are counting on you to hold VA to act with a sense of urgency. We need a culture that demands better data-driven outcomes. We need a new model that immediately drives down suicide rates significantly and not marginally. We need a Congress that allocates serious staff and resources to this issue. In our written testimony, we have outlined numerous approaches that Congress can take to get more proactive. We need you to take serious action. Chairman, ranking members, members of these committees, this concludes my testimony, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you. Next up virtually, we have from the National Coalition of Homeless Veterans, Catherine Monet.
Chairs Tester and Takano, ranking members Moran and Bost, and distinguished members of the committees, thank you for the opportunity to share NCHV's priorities with you today. We appreciate your leadership and continuing efforts to focus on the needs of veterans experiencing or at risk of homelessness. The support Congress provided has resulted in billions of dollars in new resources being utilized nationwide to meet the COVID-related needs of veterans by decompressing shelter spaces, ramping up rapid rehousing capacity, and focusing on individualized housing options in hotels and motels. I'm going to start with the elephant in the room, and that's simply that we know what we know and we don't know what we don't know this year on homelessness. HUD's recently released 2021 point-in-time count showed a drop of 10% in the sheltered veteran population, but without good data on unsheltered veteran homelessness, that information is challenging at best to interpret. Despite this gap, we remain cautiously optimistic that we can continue to reduce veteran homelessness if we can maintain and enhance current initiatives. As we turn the corner on COVID, We need to reimagine a system of care that meets the needs of veterans facing housing instability and does not leave anyone unsheltered. The pandemic has impacted veterans in unprecedented ways, and transitional housing programs like GPD are a critical component of VA's emergency response capacity for unsheltered veterans. VA has recently notified grantees that the Department of Health and Human Services public health emergency could be lifted as early as April. With many programmatic changes set to sunset at the end of the declared state of emergency, NCHV has identified some program adaptations that should be kept as best practices and extended even beyond this emergency. These include making permanent and expanding the Section 4201 spending flexibility for SSVF grantees, the ability to rapidly rehouse, veterans into hotels and motels, allowing VA to continue offering shallow subsidies to veterans in the SSVF program, supporting service providers as they continue to decongregate essential transitional housing capacity via capital grants, and increasing the permanent reimbursement rate for VA's GPD transitional housing program. Some new legislative priorities that should be considered are creating grant-making authority for the HUD-VASH program to address the additional acute needs of elderly, rural, and other priority populations such as urban Indians, Alaska Natives, and Native Hawaiians, expanding HCHV eligibility to veterans with other than honorable discharges and Guard and Reserve members who've not been called up, and improving the quality of HUD-VASH case management and continued congressional oversight over case management vacancies, contracting rates, and voucher utilization. However, the number one challenge that I hear from NCHV members is related to planning for the over 60% decrease in allowable transitional housing reimbursement rates anticipated at the end of the public health emergency if Congress fails to act. We request that you address this issue immediately for the following reasons. 1, many providers struggle to offer the services required of the program at the rate funded even before the pandemic, but the 300% emergency rate allowed many to request funding that was more aligned with the actual cost of serving a veteran. 2, increases in the rate will better support operating costs for those who are reconfiguring facilities as the program shifts its inventory towards single room options from congregate settings. 3, congregate settings are still considered higher risk by the CDC, so many providers will still be maintaining COVID safety protocols after the end of the public health emergency. 4, nonprofit organizations that have a heart for serving homeless veterans should not be subject to congressionally driven unfunded mandates that require the provision of a set menu of services at a rate that doesn't even begin to cover them. And 5, many organizations receive a much higher rate from comparable VA transitional housing programs like HCHV, which is also a program that is dramatically underfunded. S2172 addresses this and other issues. And as such, NCHV and over 60 organizations urge prompt legislative action to preserve and enhance direly needed COVID-19 related improvements. Without a legislative fix, additional VA grantees will be forced to make tough financial decisions about whether to continue prioritizing COVID safety in congregate settings at a financial loss, returning to pre-COVID occupancy levels, or discontinuing essential shelter and treatment program operations altogether. This bill would reduce the regulatory burden on funding for renovations of shelters for all veterans experiencing homelessness, and it would provide organizations nationwide with the funding and flexibility to provide adequate services to unhoused veterans. There are other provisions in this bill and the slew of accompanying House bills that go along with this that are critical to our ability to address veteran homelessness. For example, provisions that would allow VA to provide adequate training and technical assistance for its homeless programs, and provisions that would recognize the impact of the Department of Labor's HVRP program in terms of connecting veterans with long-term meaningful jobs. We have a renewed opportunity to continue reducing veteran homelessness nationwide. In summation, thank you so much for your continued partnership to ensure that every veteran facing a housing crisis has access to safe, decent, and affordable housing paired with the support services needed to remain stably housed.
Servicewomen's Action Network, Lori Manning.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the Servicewomen's Action Network, thank you for the opportunity to share SWAN's legislative agenda for 2022. Since SWAN members are predominantly women veterans, I'm going to concentrate on legislative priorities that we believe will improve the experiences of women veterans, and men too, who use VA services. Our priorities are: 1, ensuring women veterans feel safe, welcome, and well cared for when they visit VA facilities. We thank Congress for passing the Deborah Sampson Act as part of the Johnny Isaacson and David Coe Veterans Healthcare Act in 2021, which tasked the Secretary of Veterans Affairs with creating a comprehensive plan to eliminate the sexual assault and harassment of women veterans using VA facilities. And we stand by to assist VA in any way we can and to work with your committees to ensure that this requirement is met. Number 2, fix the Veterans Benefits Administration's broken system for processing compensation and pension disability claims tied to military sexual trauma. Both Congress and VA have been working on this for many years. There have been congressional hearings, GAO reports, and reports from the VA Inspector General. Just over 6 months ago, a VA IG found that 57% of denied MST claims were improperly processed. This broken system must be fixed. Therefore, SWAN strongly supports the passage of the Service Members and Veterans Empowerment and Support Act of 2021, and we thank its sponsors in both houses, including Senators Tester, Murkowski, and Congresswoman Pingree. 3, reforming the Veterans Benefits Administration's character of discharge determination process. Over the years, many veterans suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder due to combat, military sexual trauma, or other military experiences, as well as generations of LGBT veterans have been disqualified from VA benefits because they received other than honorable or bad conduct discharges tied to service-connected conditions or simply because of who they were. VBA has long had a remedy, the character of discharge determination, so veterans unfairly discharged with either OTH or BCDs could receive health care and other benefits even if they had not received a discharge upgrade from their service. We'd like to see VBA make better use of this process in aid of these veterans, and so we strongly support the passage of the Unlawful Turnaways Act, and we thank Senator Blumenthal and Congresswoman Underwood for introducing it. We, of course, support the Pact Act and the Cost of War Act, and we believe all burn pit and toxic exposure studies must examine the effect of such exposures on the development of breast cancer and infertility in both men and women. 5, the elimination of copays for contraceptives and widening access to in vitro fertilization. Most VA users are charged a copay for contraception. Considering the provisions of the ACA, that's disgraceful. We thank the House of Representatives for passing the Equal Access to Contraceptives for Veterans Act last June, and we ask the Senate to do the same. We also ask Congress to expand access to in vitro fertilization treatment for all veterans with service-connected infertility. Right now, there's a rule limiting IVF treatment for veterans suffering from service-connected infertility to those in heterosexual marriages, and only if they can produce their own gametes and carry a fetus to term. Please open IVF treatment to all veterans suffering from service-connected infertility. I deeply appreciate this opportunity to present SWAN's legislative priorities, which are so important to so many women veterans. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Monet. Thank you. I now would like to turn it over to recognize, Captain Manning. Excuse me about that. For 5 minutes, Mr. Mcneil. Mr. Mcneil?
I'm here. Thank you. I want to present the way a blinded veteran would have to present anything.
Chairman Tester.
In,
Subject. Message content.
Agenda.
Good inbox. Message content. Good afternoon. I want to thank the committee for allowing us to present virtually and for the members who are watching. Chairman Tester, Chairman Tucano, Ranking Member Moran, Ranking Member Bost, and distinguished members of the Committee on Veterans Affairs, on behalf of the Blinded Veterans Association, BVA, and its membership, we appreciate this opportunity to present our legislative priorities for 2022. As the only congressionally chartered veterans service organization exclusively dedicated to serving the needs of our nation's blinded veterans and their families, BVA first wishes to point out March 28, is our anniversary and our 77th year of our founding by World War II blinded veterans in Avon Old Farms Convalescent Home in Connecticut in 1945. BVA hopes that this second session of the 117th Congress will productively address the following legislative priorities. 1. Oversight of VA 508 compliance. 2. Caregiver benefits for catastrophically disabled blinded veterans. 3. Renewable VA auto grant for service-connected blinded veterans. 4. Support the continued improvement of programs and services for women veterans. 5. Support adequate funding of Veterans Health Administration Blind Rehabilitation Service. 6. Request the enactment of adequate protections for guide dogs and service dogs on federal properties. 7. Defense Health Agency, DHA, Blind Rehabilitation Service, BRS Continuum of Care. 8. Support the VA FY23 budget request for prosthetics and sensory aids. I will highlight 3 of our priorities. 1. Oversight of VA 508 compliance. BVA thanks Congress for its continued support of our nation's blinded and visually impaired veterans, demonstrated most by the passage of S. 3587, the VA Website Accessibility Act of 2019. This bipartisan legislation directed VA to report to Congress on the accessibility of VA websites. This report shows that only 7.7% of all 812 VA websites are fully 508 compliant, which means they have failed, uncovering a significant barrier that blind and visually impaired persons, including veterans and VA employees, have known for over 2 decades. It needs to come down. The law requires that all VA websites, medical center check-in kiosks, and the new Cerner electronic health record be fully 508 compliant. BVA requests stronger congressional oversight and agency transparency on VA's progress of updating websites, files, and applications that are still inaccessible. BVA urges VA to create an Undersecretary of Accessibility to champion with the authority and subject matter experts to lead VA's 508 compliance efforts. 2. Caregiver benefits for catastrophically disabled blinded veterans. VA reported that 80% of all PCAFC applications for FY21 were denied. BVA is concerned that blinded veterans are being discriminated against, denied fair adequate reasons and basis for PCAFAD decisions, and being denied access to their files as being unfairly and unlawfully inhibit their ability to appeal. Post violation. Clock. Now. Unread. And veterans face an ambiguous eligibility standard based on VA's rulemaking, which is vague and cryptic.
I'm sorry. Excuse me.
1620. Alert. Turn off airplane mode or use settings. OK. Button. 7. Defense Health Agency. D2. This the law requires that all VA websites, medical center check-in kiosks, and the new Cerner electronic health record be fully 508 compliant. BVA requests stronger congressional oversight and agency transparency on VA's progress of updating websites, files, and applications that are still inaccessible. BVA urges VA to create an Undersecretary of Accessibility to champion with the authority and subject matter experts to lead VA's 508 compliance efforts. 2. Caregiver benefits for catastrophically disabled blinded veterans. VA reported that 80% of all PCAFC applications for FY21 were denied. BVA is concerned that blinded veterans are being discriminated against, denied fair adequate reasons and basis for PCAFAD decisions, and being denied access to their files as being unfairly and unlawfully inhibit their ability to appeal. These are gross violations of due process. Further, blinded veterans face an ambiguous eligibility standard based on VA's rulemaking, which is vague and cryptic at most. The subjectivity in the evaluation of their disabilities further complicates the adjudication process of blinded veteran applications, causing their denial. Caregivers are the most important component of rehabilitation and maintenance for veterans with catastrophic injuries, and the welfare of their caregiver has a direct impact on the quality of care and quality of life they can sustain. BVA urges that Congress provide further clarification on eligibility standards, such as a clear definition of the need for supervision, protection, or instruction in order for the individual to maintain personal safety on a daily basis, and a definition of activities of daily living, which the VA has failed to provide in its rulemaking process. BVA strongly supports modification of PCAFC eligibility criteria regarding activities of daily living to include catastrophically disabled blinded veterans. Blinded veterans want a fair opportunity to be considered for the PCAFC program. 3. Renewable VA auto grant for service-connected blinded veterans. Accessible transportation options remain a persistent problem for blinded veterans. Public transportation is not equal across the country, especially in rural areas. This causes issues when veterans are trying to pursue employment or reach medical appointments. The VA automobile allowance makes health care and employment more accessible to blinded veterans who have a spouse or other person who can drive for them. To mitigate this hardship, BVA supports the VSO recommendation of a renewable automobile grant for eligible veterans equal to 100% of the grant maximum amount at the time the grant is renewed. BVA strongly supports H.R. 1361 and S. 444, Auto for Veterans Act. Conclusion. Once again, Chairman Tester, Chairman Takano, Ranking Member Moran, Ranking Member Bost, and all committee members, thank you for the opportunity to present to you today the legislative priorities of the Blinded Veterans Association. We look forward to furthering our relationships and working with you productively during these challenging times. I stand ready to answer. 1622.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present. I did this in the virtual way so that you can understand how a blind veteran has to read or see documents. I stand ready for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. McNeil. Mr. LeGrune, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Takano, Tester, Ranking Members Bost and Moran. I'm pleased to speak before the Joint House and Senate Veterans Service Organizations hearing today on behalf of the Black Veterans Empowerment Council. BVEC is a nonpartisan coalition of national, state, and local veteran organizations seeking to shift longstanding racial inequities suffered by Black veterans in the United States. Since its inception, BVEC has grown to represent 15+ organizations nationally, representing more than 20,000 members with ability to reach hundreds of thousands more in communities across the nation as well as in bases internationally. The BVEC has been greatly appreciative of the opportunity to collaborate robustly with the HVAC as well as the SVAC in advancing sensible and sustainable solutions to issues affecting all veterans. As the work of the 117th Congress progresses, we understand that the country is at a nexus of crisis. Political discourse and discord and unrest, rising military conflicts, economic recessions, and the tail end of a 2-year pandemic. We must all work to ensure no veteran is left behind during these difficult times. Under benefits and usage, Black veterans disproportionately held from at-risk, low-income, and underserved communities, joining the military in the hopes of serving our nation while seeking economic mobility and access to housing, education, and healthcare benefits often lacking in their respective environments. Though underserved communities are heavily recruited, many Black veterans return to resource-poor neighborhoods and withstand frequent denials, deterrence, and misinformation on how to appropriately utilize and access the veteran benefits they've earned. To that end, BVEC is piloting an initiative to train 500 Black service officers across the country to ensure veterans' benefits are widely understood and adequately accessed. To address historic disparities, VA must contend with the ways dishonorable discharges have adversely affected Black service members, impeding their ability to attain crucial veteran benefits and job placement post-service. A legacy of stark disparities in punishment under the Uniform Code of Military Justice continues to fuel a pipeline of Black veterans who fall victim to homelessness, joblessness, and mental health crisis, which place undue burden on under-resourced municipalities and nonprofits. The BVEC calls for the convening of a task force to formulate recommendations to confront the legacy of discriminatory bad paper discharges, with an emphasis on disproportionate impact on Black and minority veterans to ascertain and codify VA's role in mitigating this harm moving forward. To fulfill its commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, VA must also improve micro-targeting outreach across the Black veterans community. BVEC and its affiliated partners and organizations stand, crisis coupled with the persistent unemployment and underemployment reflected a bleak series of crises on the horizon. As a host of factors complicate benefit utilization, BVEC supports the work of the Black Veterans Project in advancing research on racial disparities in access to veterans benefits across departments of the Veterans Affairs. The BVP's findings to date reveal statistically significant racial disparities in disability rates and denials suffered by Black veterans and highlights a need for redress and reform. For example, Black veterans suffer from a 30% disparity in mental health benefits approval. As it pertains to Black women, the BVEC commends the passage of the Deborah Sampson Act, which provides much-needed reforms to VA accommodations to care for women veterans. We also applaud the implementation of a zero-tolerance policy around sexual harassment in VA facilities championed by Chairman Tester. Women of color continue to be the fastest-growing segment of our homeless veteran community. We ask that the VA prioritize a plan centered on preventing and aiding our women members with stable housing suitable for them and, when applicable, their children. As it pertains to the 688 Congressional Gold Medal, the BVEC commends the passage of a bipartisan legislation to award the Congressional Gold Medal to the members of the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps, my apologies, who were assigned to the 6888th Central Postal Directory Battalion, the 6888, during World War II. Given the increased age of the surviving members of the 6888 veterans, this historic and groundbreaking women's organization deserves to be addressed and recognized for their sacrifices and commitments. And finally, under the GI Bill Repair Act, the introduction of the GI Bill Repair Act by U.S. House Majority Whip James Clyburn and Congressman Seth Moulton, which seeks to provide GI Bill benefits to the surviving spouses and descendants of World War II veterans, Black World War II veterans, alive and those who have passed. This bill enacted is profoundly necessary legislation that begins the process of amending that over 900,000 Black World War II veterans and their families who were denied access and utilization to those benefits at their time of separation from war. I appreciate the opportunity to serve before you today, and I stand ready to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. LeGrune. Mr. Palladino, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Chairman Tester, Chairman Takano, Ranking Members Bost and Moran, and distinguished members of the Joint Committee. My name is Tom Palladino, President of the National Association of State Directors of Veteran Affairs, otherwise known as NASDA, and the Executive Director of the Texas Veterans Commission. Our association is comprised of the executive leaders representing the veteran affairs agencies in all 50 states, 5 territories, in the District of Columbia. We are tasked by our respective governors and legislatures to address the needs and improve the lives of our veterans, their families, and survivors, and to ensure they receive the services and benefits they have earned. Nationally, we are the second largest provider of veteran services after the federal VA, and our roles continue to expand. NASDA, through its member states and territories, is the single organization that represents and serves all of America's 19 million veterans and their families, and collectively contribute nearly $10 billion each year in support of our nation's veterans. NASDA has a long-standing partnership with the United States Department of Veteran Affairs. Since 2012, we have entered into a formal memorandum of agreement between the VA and NASDA to increase our direct services to our veterans and their families. Last week, VA Secretary Dennis McDonough and I updated the memorandum of agreement on behalf of our organizations, enhancing our cooperative relationship. Our written testimony covers a wide range of items, so due to time limitations, I'll focus only on a few. So first, NASDA requests full congressional support of the President's FY 2022 VA budget in order to deliver services to meet the needs of our veterans. Second, NASDA fully supports efforts to increase veterans' access to VA healthcare under the provisions of the Mission Act. While the VA continues to place emphasis on suicide prevention, there is still much work to be done, given that the rate of suicide is still too high. It is vital that the Veteran Health Administration work with the states to address this critical issue. NASDA proposes the creation of outreach grants from the VA to the states to increase veteran suicide prevention and awareness. Third, NASDA, along with the National Association of State Veteran Homes, supports a continued commitment to substantial funding of the VA's State Veteran Home Construction Grant Program, which is the largest provider of long-term care to America's veterans. We request full funding support for all Priority 1 projects, increasing the VA budget for state veteran homes from $90 to $500 million. Fourth, regarding veteran benefit services, states and territories continue to take on a greater role representing veterans filing disability claims and pensions. Regardless of whether the states use state employees, veteran service organizations, or county veteran service officers, collectively, we are essential in advocating for veterans and working with the Veterans Benefit Administration to effectively manage the claims process. Given the claims backlog and the number of claims on appeal, NASBA recommends making federal funding available to states for claims advocacy and to further reduce the backlog and maintain progress on expediting existing and new claims. One of the results of the Appeals Modernization Act is an increase in veterans choosing hearings at the Board of Veteran Appeals. We commend the BVA for increasing the number of virtual hearings. However, the BVA still uses manual procedures in the appeal process. So NASBA supports BVA's request for additional funding to automate their processes, which will result in an increased number of timely board decisions. Fifth, the VA National Cemetery Administration partners with states, territories, and tribal governments to manage the Veterans Cemetery Grant Program. NASBA recommends that the construction grant program
Senator Moran, I'm going to call on you for your 5 minutes of questioning. Hopefully, Senator Moran, go ahead.
Chairman Takano, thank you very much. Let me begin with, well, first of all, I want to make certain that I express my gratitude for your remarks, Mr. Clannon, in regard to the 6888. There was a monument built at Fort Leavenworth in honor of these African-American women, and it caused me to have a knowledge and an interest, and I'm pleased to have a House bill, have the House now pass a Senate bill that's on its way to the President, and allowing a congressional medal to honor the survivors. And I thank you for recognizing their service to our nation in difficult circumstances, and I'm grateful for that. Let me talk to Mr. Butler about our withdrawal from Afghanistan. Mr. Butler, let me find you. There you are. I've spoken certainly at home and here on the Senate floor about my concerns about how we left Afghanistan last year. And I know that there are many veterans who continue to bear the brunt of the manner by which we withdrew. We know that there were consequences to their mental health and well-being and concerns about suicide ideation, not just for Iraq and Afghanistan veterans, for others as well. Tell me what your experience is in regard to consequences in regard to this circumstance. And if you can then, in addition to what it meant to those who served there, what about the efforts that you know about our any continuing efforts to get others out of Afghanistan?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. It is something that we want to address. It is a priority. I touch on it in our written comments. A few things. I don't think that there is a more galvanizing issue around which the veteran community has rallied with one single voice. Toxic exposure, frankly, might be the other one. But the withdrawal from Afghanistan, the following effects, the need to get our Afghan allies out, that has been something where the veteran community has spoken with one voice. We saw the response from the military and veteran community at the desire to get them out. We saw the impact that it had on the military and veteran community. Our program, a program that IAVA has a quick reaction force where it provides direct support to veterans. We saw a massive increase in folks reaching out for help, mental health care support, and things like that because of how it was affecting them. We applaud Congress for including the Afghan War Commission Act in the NDAA. That's going to go a long way to addressing the things that went wrong, not just with the withdrawal, but frankly throughout the 20 years that we were in Afghanistan. One of the big things that we're pushing for now is the Afghan Adjustment Act to make sure that we are taking care of our Afghan allies, and we continue to coalesce around the absolute need to focus on those who are still left behind. The situation in Afghanistan is deteriorating. It seems very evident that Taliban is taking advantage of the fact that the world has shifted their attention to Ukraine to do things like literally not allowing women to leave the country anymore. That's something that was just announced by the Taliban within the last few days, obviously because the world is not paying attention anymore, and we have to make sure that that isn't allowed to happen, that we continue the focus to not only get our allies out, but to then make sure that they're taken care of when they get to the U.S. or whatever country they're going to settle in.
Just in Kansas alone, or at least in our office, Kansans provided us with the names of 1,000 individuals, 1,000+ individuals of who were still in Afghanistan asking for our help for their departure. And I don't want the focus to be not shine as well. Ukraine is an important issue at the moment, important and tragic, but there is people who still are in need of our help, and there's ways that we can help you or you can help us in that regard. We volunteer. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Turn to Ranking Member Bost.
Thank you. Whoever would want to answer this, we're hearing concerns in our office, both in district and then here also through other members that know of the position I have with the Veterans Affairs Committee, that people are still having trouble getting appointments into the VA. We're also hearing that many of them, and I'll give you an example of one particular legislator that brought this to us, and we tried to deal with it. There was and basically it's not fulfilling the Mission Act like we put it in place to do. Well, we had one veteran that was actually in the middle of receiving chemotherapy and received a letter from the VA that they needed to return to get that chemotherapy at the VA. And when they got to the VA said they didn't have room for them, and they wouldn't understand why they interrupted that. Are you hearing concerns like this where many of your members that might be in rural areas around the nation are having these same type problems of still getting care and service?
Right, Ranking Member Bost, this is Lieutenant General Lennington from Wounded Warrior Project. Continuing, we believe the VA is the best place to get care for veterans, and that's as evidenced in our annual Warrior Survey, where the majority of our veterans get their health care from the VA, and even during the period of COVID, 7 in 10 got medical support, telemedicine from the VA, and 81% were happy with that. That said, we do need to continue to provide access to veterans in more robust manners through the community care program. That was part of the Mission Act that still needs to be enacted in areas where veterans are having difficulty. I'll tell you that the Staff Sergeant Parker Gordon Fox Suicide Prevention Grant Program, as part of the Commander Scott Hannon Act, needs to be implemented quickly, because there are a lot of community-based programs where veterans aren't able to get care that they can get care utilizing that grant program.
Good.
Representative Bost.
Yes.
This is Mcneil for the BVA. There's an issue with the community care-based program, which part of it may relate with the VA. The fact that we could identify a veteran that's in crisis, but for flag when he checks in, but when you have an MST veteran or a blinded veteran, you can't identify them when they go to the VA or to community-based plan. And there was a recent issue where a female veteran MST went to a CMP, and it was a male clinician that was going to do the exam, and she ran out of there. And I thought it was something that should have been looked at. If you could identify a troubled veteran has PTSD, why can you not flag the MST ones so they're aware that they're there, and a blinded veteran that are aware, instead of asking the question?
Sure. Others? We didn't have much time. Let me just say thank you to all of you and for the services you provide. You're our front line, and you give us the information that we need. I appreciate each and every one of you. And with that, Chairman, I yield back.
Ms. Underwood.
Thank you so much. And thank you to our representatives from the VSOs who are here with us today. It's been an honor to work alongside you on behalf of our nation's veterans, including via my Protecting Moms Who Served Act, which President Biden signed into law last November. The Protecting Moms Who Served Act is a historic step to provide our veterans with the world-class maternal health care they've earned. And the bill commissions the first ever comprehensive study of maternal mortality, morbidity, and disparities among veterans. And it also authorizes $15 million in new funding to strengthen VA's maternity care coordination programs. The Wounded Warrior Project not only endorsed this bill, but also worked tirelessly to build momentum for the legislation to pass in the House and the Senate. And I am so glad that we have Lieutenant General Michael Linnington, the CEO of the Wounded Warrior Project, with us today. Lieutenant General Linnington, as we prepare for the fiscal year 23 appropriations process, can you describe why it's so important to fully fund the Protecting Moms Who Served Act authorization and ensure that VA's maternity care coordination programs have the staff and resources they need?
Representative Underwood, first of all, let me just say thank you for championing that legislation, Protecting Moms Who Served Act. It was a critical piece of the legislation. We are very proud to support it. And we know that comprehensive maternity care is absolutely critical for all women veterans that choose to become moms. We also know that women veterans using VA maternity care are more likely to experience pregnancy complications, and for a variety of reasons, because they've been deployed, have PTSD, have MST in their background, et cetera. I can't think of something more important. Next year is to extend that $15 million funding into subsequent years, so we appreciate you letting us know about that legislation. It's certainly welcomed, not just from our women veterans, but from all of our veterans that want to support our women alumni.
Well, thank you, sir. We're looking forward to working with you on that appropriations process. This week, the House of Representatives is preparing to vote on the Honoring Our Pact Act, a bipartisan bill that will finally provide access to VA healthcare for more than 3.5 million veterans exposed to toxic substances. I'm proud to be an original co-sponsor of the Honoring Our Pact Act, which is a full accounting of the true cost of war. And I appreciated the recent comments from Jeremy Butler, the CEO of the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, who emphasized the need for the Senate to follow the lead of the House and take comprehensive action on toxic exposure legislation. Mr. Butler, last month you explained on CNN that the piecemeal legislation passed by the Senate basically does about a third, that's a quote, of what VSOs have been calling for in legislation to address toxic exposures. Can you describe why it's so important that the Senate pass comprehensive legislation like the Honoring Our Pact Act?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I mean, really, it's for two reasons. One, it's completely overdue. And two, the statistic that I cited in my testimony, 70% of veterans who are applying for burn pit and other toxic-related benefits from the VA are getting denied. We need to get beyond this point where we're forcing veterans to fight, sometimes literally on their deathbeds, for VA benefits that they were guaranteed when they signed up for service. The the Cost of War Act, the Honoring Our Pact Act, that does everything that veterans got together and put down in legislation, handed to the VA committees and saying, this is what we need to do. That legislation gets this done. A piecemeal effort just means we're going to continue to have to be back here, not just year after year, but month after month to tell you that the job is not done, veterans are still dying, and we're still waiting on you to do what we told you needed to be done. So now's the time. Literally tomorrow, the House of Representatives has the opportunity to pass the comprehensive bill, send it to the Senate, and get things done.
Get things done. That's what we're here to do. Thank you all so much for being here, and I am so pleased that we've had the opportunity to hear from so many of you. I would like to yield 2 minutes to Thomas Palladino in order for him to be able to complete his testimony.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that, Congresswoman. My power went out, and I don't know what it was, but I got back on, and so I'll keep the testimony. So I was talking about the VA National Cemetery Administration partnering with the states, territories, and tribal governments to manage the Veteran Cemetery Program. And so NASA recommends the construction grant program budget be increased from $45 to $60 million. This modest increase to the budget would allow funding of new state cemeteries to bring burial benefits to the growing needs of eligible veteran spouses and families. 6, women now comprise nearly 20% of the armed forces and are the fastest growing veteran cohort. There are several areas NASVA believes VA can work on to close gaps in service, ensure good continuity of care, and better address the needs of women veterans. One is a disproportionate and non-standard availability to access gender-specific health care. The decision-making and planning for new services must be data-driven and veteran-centric to ensure all veterans, regardless of gender, receive the care they have earned. 7th, and the last issue is the Transition Assistance Program, TAP, is a cooperative effort among DOD, DOL, and the VA. However, there is no mandate to include the states in the TAP curriculum. It is a major challenge for transitioning service members to connect with state benefits and services that are available to them. This lack of connectivity between transitioning service members and the states is not only a significant barrier to their employment, but increases their mental stress associated with their transition. So NASVA recommends that all State Department of Veteran Affairs be included in the TAP and military installations in their state and be allowed to connect with transitioning service members who are moving to their state prior to separations to inform them of their specific benefits in each particular state. Mr. Chairman, distinguished members of the House and Senate Veteran Affairs Committee, with your continued support, we can ensure that the needs of our veterans and their families are addressed, adequately resourced, and remain a priority. Thank you for your work on behalf of our nation's veterans and for including the National Association of State Directors of Veteran Affairs in this hearing and allowing me to come back online after our EMP disaster down here. So thank you very much. I welcome any questions you have and comments on behalf of those we serve. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Palladino, thank you so much. And thank you to the VSO witnesses that have joined us. Subject to the call of the chair, this hearing is in recess for votes. Okay.
Thank you very much. You've been very, very graceful.
Okay, HVAC.
Are the meeting platform hosts ready to begin?
Yes.
Yes.
Daniel, are you ready to begin?
One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight, nine, 10.
Are the meeting platform hosts ready to begin?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, are you ready to resume the hearing?
Yes.
Please provide a 5-second countdown.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I bring the meeting back to order. I recognize myself for 5 minutes. I have a question for General Lingington. You mentioned the importance of VA's successful implementation of the Electronic Health Modernization Program. Are there any capabilities and services that VA is not able to provide veterans with their current system that you would like to see provided?
Representative Mervin, I'm going to have to get back with you on that. If you don't mind, I'll take that one for the record. I'm not an expert on VBMS or the EHR. I do know that it's 20 years overdue. I really applaud the work of DOD and VA and the Congress to finally collaborate on a single solution, but I do not know of any capabilities that we'd like to add to the current system.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Joe Mcneil, Blinded Veterans Association. Our main concern is the accessibility of the systems getting into them. The fact that they're going to create a system that's not accessible to blind veterans, and it's like kicking the can down the road, which we've been doing for the last 20 years. They say they're going to fix it, and they keep promising to fix it, and it's over year. That becomes a decision. They have not consciously fixed it so that blinded veterans got to use kiosks, this new system they got coming out, Cerner. None of this helps a blinded veteran. You're going to put a system out that you're going to turn around and come back and have patches for it. That's job security for the people that are creating system. That's not helping us.
Thank you very much, Joe. If I might follow up with, what are some systematic cures for what you have seen as it's missing?
Well, if we start with the kiosks is not accessible at all. We do everything with audible listening. As by my presentation, which was audible, I can't read a written document. Most of the veterans that are visually impaired or blind can't. So because of that, you have to listen to what's going on. If it's not talking to us, we can't do anything with it. And when you're looking at checking it for a kiosk or trying to access a website, the website is not accessible to us. How are we supposed to fill out a form or even process something that we can't get to?
Okay. I thank you very much, Mr. Mcneil. At this time, Mr. LeGrune, the promise of the interoperability between the Department of Defense and the VA health records is the core goal of electronic health record modernization. How are the current delays in deployment of a new system impacting veterans' care?
Well, sir, to be honest with you and frank, any delay is significant. Wait times for veterans have been substantially impacted by COVID and the shift of attention and resources to address those needs, and I think they're extremely important. However, we also see significant delays in people having access to mental health, being qualified, being certified, getting competent care, and it also has impacted how people can get not just primary care, but specialty care. So if you were a veteran and you were seeking care for cancer, for example, and you wanted to get a referral to someone who was an oncologist, and you were deferred because of COVID and some of the other factors, being processed through the system has been slagged, has been dragged down, but also has been delayed, which has further delayed many people getting the access that they need in a timely fashion.
Mr. Butler, the Secretary has taken several important steps during this past year to ensure that the Department is welcoming to all veterans, no matter what their gender, race, sexual orientation, or background. Last summer, VA completed the department-wide review by the Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Access, or IDEA, Task Force, which came up with a number of very useful recommendations toward improved inclusion and equity. My question for the witness is, how is VA doing? How well has the department doing in creating a welcoming place for all veterans? And would you like to see more collaboration and coordination between the department and the VSO community regarding equity and inclusion?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. And the short answer, and to start really with your last question, is absolutely yes. More collaboration is the key. We were actually talking about that in between here on the panel, and we look forward to not only having more of an inclusive panel as you've done this year, continuing that to give more organizations the opportunity to speak directly to you. I think Secretary McDonough has been doing a great job of opening things up, communicating directly with more of us. We welcome more of that. One of the things that we've been pushing for, and it was great to see an email coming out from the VA just last week, was on changing the motto to something more inclusive. So that's something we've been pushing for a long time. So there is still always more work to be done, but I think we're moving in the right direction.
Thank you, Mr. Butler. At this time, I'd like to recognize Congressman Bergman for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, thank you to all of you veterans. Welcome home. Can't say that often enough. Thank you to all the VSOs present today, and especially anyone who might have traveled from Michigan here to D.C. We're having a wonderfully nice spring day, which we are not in Michigan, but that's a different story. Commander Hune, I've read your testimony and have heard you loud and clear today. I share your frustration. We cannot continue to fund the same types of programs and expect a different result. We know that is the absolute definition of nuttiness, okay? I champion the grant program that you are referencing in your testimony because I believe that we have to be more innovative with veterans' mental health. And as you mentioned in your testimony, we have to move forward toward an outcomes-based model. Fund what works. Fund what leads our veterans toward happier, healthier, more productive lives. Seems simple. But as you note, the VA seems to really not have a sense of urgency in implementing what could be life-saving measures. So what can we do to put pressure on the VA in a positive way, hopefully, to act with some sense of urgency?
Thank you, Congressman. AMVETS would like to see a roundtable set up, a very near future, March or April would be very good, to monitor and set goals for the VA. And we would also ask the VA to be invited to that roundtable to share some of the failures and the successes they have seen, and if you would put a matrix on them, and put their feet in the fire, so to say. We need to change the goals and the principles of what we're doing with veteran suicide. 6,000 a year is just way too many. It hasn't went down significantly for the $15 billion that we throw in to veteran suicide. I believe that, and AMVETS believes that if we start monitoring the VA and their successes and their failures in this, and start outreaching to programs that actually work and succeed, because there's programs out there, and learn from their successes and their failures. And I don't see that that's happening right now.
Yeah, it's not a simple question and not a simple answer, but for at least 5+ years now, with my membership on the committee, we have pressed continually the VA to show some sense of urgency. And they're good folks working at the VA, but they need to be led in such a way that they know that if they have a good idea, we can get it implemented. When you mentioned the roundtable, subject-specific roundtables, back in the 115th Congress, we started doing roundtables under Chairman Rowe's direction, and it worked very well because we had all the VSOs on one side of the table, we had the VA on the other side of the table, and it was a subject. And we as members just kind of sat there, didn't say much. We just listened to the conversation and learned from the dialogue between all of you and the Veterans Administration. So whatever we can do, especially when it comes to rural veterans, and I would suggest to you, rural is not, at least in my district, we don't have any urban in our district. We have some, maybe a couple of small towns that would be considered suburban, but we are rural and remote. So anything suggestions that you might have, whether it be, procedures, capabilities for the blind veterans, especially when you get into a teleworking situation, or where you're tapping it out on a keyboard through a synthetic voice or whatever it happens to be. We need those kinds of solutions that will work for our veterans who live remotely, because the good news is they do. The bad news is when you're remote, you're out of contact, which makes you potentially more susceptible to suicidal ideations because you don't have that human interaction. And I appreciate all that you all do. Let's keep the dialogue going. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman. At this time, I recognize myself for 5 minutes. Captain Manning. Members of our committee have introduced legislation to examine the lasting effects on veterans due to past discriminatory Pentagon policies regarding the discharge of service members. In past decades, too many service members were unfairly discharged under Don't Ask, Don't Tell because they were suffering from PTSD due to pregnancy or due to other antiquated reasons, and received other than honorable discharge. This has too often resulted in veterans being denied access to the benefits that they are earned and need. Can you provide your thoughts on the lasting effects of these past and unfair discharge policies?
Yes, thank you for that question. The first is, particularly when there's an OTH or a BCD involved, there are no veterans benefits. There's no GI Bill, there's no employment and training, there's no health care unless you have MST and you can get some minimum for that. The services right now on the DoD side are doing a lot to upgrade some of those discharges. But a lot of these veterans have totally lost touch with VA. And they don't even know that if they have an OTH, and that it was military sexual trauma or PSD or pregnancy back in the 50s or 60s involved, that they can even ask for a service discharge upgrade through their service. Also, there are a lot of discharges that the services are looking at for upgrade, and one of the things that we talk about a lot is the character of discharge power that VA has. It allows them to look at somebody with an OTH discharge or a BCD and decide that there were circumstances there and allow them to begin to get at least some of their benefits. So even if they're trying to get an upgrade through the services, they may have to wait a year or two now because they're so backlogged. And that character of discharge power that VA has is wasted. Most people don't know it exists. And there are very few statistics on it. When I've looked for statistics on that, they seem to do about 3% are granted. That's ridiculous. And they don't seem to have any transparency, not much I can find out about the training or even what the procedure is. So that whole thing needs to be looked at, and that's why we support the bill that Senator Blumenthal and Congresswoman Underwood have proposed.
Okay.
That would help.
And I have a follow-up question. Last session, we passed the Isaacson and Roe Veterans Healthcare and Benefits Improvement Act of 2020, which included the Deborah Sampson Act. How satisfied are you thus far with the VA's implementation of these measures, and where is there room for improvement?
Well, the main thing that VA was charged, well, they were charged with a lot of things on that, but specifically, all the best care in the world isn't going to help women veterans if they get harassed by their fellow veterans or staff members when they go. So it's clearing up that veteran-on-veteran sexual assault and sexual harassment that happens at VA. And that's part of the Deborah Sampson Act. VA is charged with fixing that. Secretary McDonough participated in the independent review commission that the Secretary of Defense did, but most of the VA participation in that seemed to fall away over time. And I think I am hoping that they will come out with something like an IRC for VA. They need, first of all, a system so that a veteran can even report that he or she is being sexually harassed or assaulted. There's great stuff laid out if you're a staff member at VA, but there's nothing in writing about what a veteran who's a customer should do. So they need, and I know they've got things going on over there, but it's hard to figure out at what stage they're in. They do have a special group that meets with the secretary and his staff, but it's hard to get any feedback from where they stand and what they're planning to do. So transparency is the first thing we need, and then we can make judgments from there.
Thank you, Captain. At this time, I'd like to recognize Representative Cawthorn for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. To all of our witnesses, thank you all very much for being here. Lieutenant General Lennington, in your testimony, you mentioned that supporting the expansion of telehealth and telemental health would be a net positive. But in Western North Carolina, there is a dire need for broadband access. And it being such a rural area, there's so few places, such a long drive for them to get to the VA. Do you mind expanding on what Congress can do to ensure that we have access for all veterans to telemedicine?
I can't speak to the broadband issue. I will tell you that telemedicine, especially during COVID, was something that, threw us all on our heels. But we quickly translated a lot of our programs to virtual delivery, especially in the areas of mental health. And our Wounded Warriors did the same. And a large majority of them that took advantage of those were women veterans. So that really opened our eyes to the importance of not just offering in-person programming, but also offering virtual offerings. And as I mentioned in my written testimony and from our recent annual Warrior Survey, 7 in 10 of our alumni that took part in the survey, representing all 160,000, took advantage of VA telemedicine opportunities during COVID. And it had a very high success rate. 81% noted that the the therapy they had received through telemedicine was good, was acceptable. The broadband issue is a big issue. I'm hopeful that, you know, some of the infrastructure investments that I see coming out now with, you know, with the bipartisan infrastructure bill will help with some of the rural areas, establishing those broadband areas. And we're working with some of the internet providers that are also establishing broadband islands, 1,000 of them around the country, to help provide broadband access specifically for veterans that can allow them to tap into some of these virtual offerings.
That's fantastic. Thank you, sir. And Lieutenant General, just one follow-up question. You know, veterans have ensured that we can all pursue the American dream, and I think having the VA loan for veterans to be able to achieve the American dream, to own their own home, it's incredible. But what, in your opinion, can Congress do to make entrepreneurship more accessible to veterans with things like loans or grant programs, or really just what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it comes down to training and opportunity that the VA and DoD provide at the transition point, and I think that's key. I also know that for a veteran to take advantage of a entrepreneur program or start their own business, they have to have some financial stability to do so and have the availability, have the resources to do that. We found that especially over the past 2 years, many of our veterans, especially those we serve, wounded, ill, and injured, are in financial jeopardy, and it's hard to start a business or start your own entrepreneurship when you're having trouble putting groceries on the table. So I think we have to look at how do we continue to inspire those that can to transition quickly into meaningful careers, and then for those that want to pursue the entrepreneurship, then you do it with help from the VA through the entrepreneurship program and with organizations like ours that can support some of that.
That's fantastic. Well, to all of our witnesses, thank you all so much for supporting our veteran community so much. It truly means a lot. I've got a lot of veterans in my district, and so I really appreciate all of your work. Thank you all very much. With that, Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. At this time, I recognize Representative Trone for 5 minutes.
Chairman, thank you very much. Last night, I know I was thrilled, and I'm sure all of you were, to hear President Biden announce his plan for more mental health resources during the State of the Union address. I'm looking forward to working with the VSOs to ensure we can meet our promise to provide mental health resources and that they're tailored to meet the unique needs of our vets. I'd like to focus my remarks on the new Staff Sergeant Parker Gordon Fox Suicide Prevention Grant Program, which was signed into law in 2020 as part of a broader mental health package. Through the important advocacy of the Wounded Warrior Project, veterans from across the country have shared how this mental health program will support their local communities. Right here in my community, Miss Angela Waller from Germantown, Maryland, told us how the increased collaboration will help Maryland veterans receive mental health care faster in a more coordinated manner. When our veterans need care, they need it now, and they can't be asked to jump through unlimited hoops. So my first question is to Lieutenant General Linnington. It's clear this grant program has fantastic potential. What kind of services stand out for WWP, and what does WWP have? Any advice for what type of programs should be targeted?
Congressman, first of all, thanks for meeting with Angela. I know she was thrilled for having the visit with you as part of Operation Advocacy and speaking to the issues that we addressed both in our written statement and in our opening comments. The grant program under the Staff Sergeant Gordon Fox Parker Act is very important to provide communities and community programs, community organizations that can provide programs and services to veterans to help them connect and heal both physically and mentally, and get back into their jobs. Many of these community-based programs don't have the resources that government programs have. Certainly, they don't have the resources that Wounded Warrior Project has. So providing these $750,000 grants as part of the $170 million program that was recently approved is very important for those organizations to provide community-based programs that help that veteran regain the connections and the camaraderie they had when they were in uniform. I will also tell you, I think the best programs are those that refer the veteran back into carry-on care at the VA, wherever that care is available. Because if you don't have that continuity of care, then the question is, why? So I'm a huge fan of this legislation. Thank you for sponsoring it, and thanks for getting it off the ground and implemented across our country.
It's really important that we handle and deal with this area directly, and this legislation's been a great first step. So thanks for sharing your thoughts. We have one last question, which is open to any of the panelists. What models of collaboration do you think we can create the biggest impact for mental health services? Where should we be collaborating to get the most bang for our buck?
I hate to steal the mic again, but Congressman, I'll tell you, we have one right now that we're very proud of that we have in partnership with the VA, and that's our Warrior Care Network. That program is a comprehensive PTSD intensive outpatient program where any post 9/11 veteran or active duty service member can go get 2 weeks of intensive outpatient care, individual therapy, group therapy, alternate therapies, yoga, Tai Chi, nutrition, includes the family, includes the service dogs, and the VA have a partnership with Wounded Warrior Project so that the VA employees are at the site of these 4 academic medical centers at Mass Gen, Emory, UCLA Health, and Rush University. And that, to me, is the best model of collaboration in the mental health arena, where nonprofit, government, non-government organizations can work together to get the veteran into care and then ensure the continuity of care after the veteran completes the program.
Perfect. Well, thank you for your feedback on this topic. We've got to keep expanding our mental health resources for our vets. We owe it to them. And with that, I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Congressman. At this time, I recognize Senator Blumenthal for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the wonderful representatives of these great organizations who are with us in this panel, and to the earlier panel, the Veteran of Foreign War panel that testified so well. And I'm sorry I wasn't able to ask questions then, but I was going to mention, as a matter of fact, the need for more investment in VA infrastructure, which affects all of your groups and all the veterans you represent. There have been a number of incidents that have really spurred my call for action. One incident related to the tragic deaths of a VA employee and a contractor in 2019 at the West Haven VA Medical Center. And the infrastructure that we have, the facility in West Haven, desperately needs replacement. I suspect the same is true of your infrastructure in many other parts of the country. The kinds of structural changes that need to be made, and in some cases rebuilding, are an absolute imperative. And the statement made by the VFW and by many of you support that point. I want to turn to the issue that has concerned many of you, and I appreciate your leadership on it from the VSO community. We've seen a devastating impact on the veterans community from invisible wounds of war, including post-traumatic stress, military sexual trauma, traumatic brain injuries. We've all talked about, the president did last night. Veterans struggling with these burdens really deserve a fair opportunity for the character of their discharge to be reviewed if they've been discharged without honorable status, bad paper discharge, so they can receive support and treatment for these wounds. In the meantime, they need and deserve access to mental health care at the VA, which is guaranteed under law. My office, my guess is many of your offices, my colleagues on this call, have received complaints about unlawful turnaway of veterans with other than honorable discharges who are seeking mental health care at the VA. I have introduced a measure called the Unlawful Turnaways Act of 2021 earlier this session to eliminate and remedy unlawful turnaways. I submitted comments and proposed regulations to the Federal Register regarding the VA's request for information, updating character of discharge regulations. In this submission, I outlined specific ways to close the regulatory gaps that allowed too many veterans to fall through the cracks in effect without the kind of healthcare, mental health care they need and deserve. Many of them were discharged less than honorably because of the behavioral results of their invisible wounds. The traumatic effects of their injuries caused them to act out. So let me ask Ms. Manning, because I know your organization, the Service Women's Action Network, SWAN, are supporters of this legislation, and others are as well. I think particularly organizations that have contributed to my understanding of it, like the Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, Jeremy Butler, thank you for being on this panel. The Wounded Warrior Project, Lieutenant General Livingston, and of course, I work closely with Jack Mcmanus and others at Vietnam Veterans of America. But Captain Manning, if you could respond to this question, how would this legislation assist women and men veterans who have traumatic injuries?
Thank you for asking, Senator. And in fact, I was talking to one of your staff members, well, typing with them just yesterday about this legislation. We are strong supporters of it. We think of it mainly from the military sexual trauma point of view, but as you said, it's got a much wider application. There are many men and women who have suffered military sexual trauma back through the years. And we're picking up some of them now, some of the younger ones through service discharge upgrades and that sort of thing so that they can get help from VA. But there's two generations of people that suffered this sort of trauma that don't know that they can even go to VA for some basic mental health care. I think one of the problems is that VA is a huge organization, and they use the VISNs, and the regional offices have an awful lot of independence, which is necessary in a lot of cases. But for something like this, they need a general set of procedures laid out when somebody with an OTH, for instance, comes and asks for help. You don't just turn them away. You do a character of discharge assessment, and you have to take into account the circumstances under which they were discharged. And I don't think the VA is training people properly how to do that. I think you might go to the regional offices and find a lot of people have never even heard of character of discharge. And it should happen anytime an OTH person asks. And on the other hand, the people out there who have been out there since the Vietnam War, perhaps with an OTH discharge, don't even know they can go and ask. So we need a lot of, not just within VA channels, but a lot of outreach to veterans who don't use VA so they can learn this is a possibility. But we'd love to work with you on this. We're very supportive of it.
Excellent answer. Thank you so much, Captain Manning. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. I have one last question for Captain Manning. It was a scenario that I had faced as a local elected official. A veteran who was assaulted or a survivor of military sexual trauma turned to alcohol and drugs to hide from that trauma, and then was dishonorably discharged based on getting caught on that scenario. My question to you is, what process is in place for that veteran to successfully be able to receive the treatment necessary, and what recourse might they have going forward?
And there may be something I don't know, but if it's a dishonorable discharge, which is awarded by a general court-martial, I don't think there's much of anything in place besides getting an appeal up through the court system and revoking the discharge.
Was discharged based on, and I don't remember the facts, based on the alcohol and the drug use?
Yeah, now if it was an OTH discharge or bad conduct discharge, there are processes. They could either go back through their service, each service has a discharge review board, and Congress has changed the laws over the past 4 or 5 years, particularly with respect to PTSD and military sexual trauma, telling these service boards over in the DOD that they have to take that into consideration when they're doing a discharge review. And if they get the discharge review done and the discharge is upgraded, then they're eligible for a lot of the help they're not eligible for right now. The other possibility is to go directly to VA and ask for a character of discharge review, what the Senator Blumenthal was just talking about. Right. And that doesn't upgrade their discharge, but if it's granted, they begin to be able to be eligible for VA health care and can help with and enter into the VA programs for alcohol or drug addiction kinds of things.
Okay.
Congressman, if I can jump in real quick, both for you and Senator Blumenthal, we have a small team at Wounded Warrior Project called a complex case coordination team, and they handle exactly these cases. And these are largely veterans that have suffered trauma, gotten in trouble and discharged because of it, and turned to alcohol, drugs. They all have issues that need to be addressed through psychiatric counseling or traumatic brain injury treatment. And we have very close coordination with the VA to get these warriors back into care. So for either you or the senator, we take those cases on. Our team started out as a team of 3, and I think we're over 15 now full-time individuals that manage these cases. So we'd be happy to talk with your staff about how we can help.
And I welcome that. And the simple fact is making sure that there's policy that takes these scenarios that are welcoming to make sure that veterans receive the mental health care that they need based on those facts. So I'd be welcome that information. With that, I want to thank all of you for being here today and for your service and your testimony today. It has been enlightening and deeply appreciate your commitment to our nation's veterans, their families, and survivors. We look forward to working with you and your organizations and your members throughout this Congress to make sure that we continue to honor their service and sacrifice. Again, I want to thank you for your commitment to the veterans, to our country, and I want to thank you for being here today. And with that, all members will have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include any extraneous materials. Again, thank you for your presentation, and this hearing is now adjourned.